Hi guys, welcome back to another exciting video, so sit back, relax, and let's get started. No, it's okay, I understand why she's worried. I would be too in her shoes. I'm not about to start hating my mom just because she didn't believe in me. I'll just treat her like everyone else. I'll make her believe in me. I'll show everyone I can become a hero. Besides, it's not like she hasn't helped me at all this whole time. Will do, Mom. Thanks for the advice, and thank you especially for teaching me to sew. I would have never been able to finish my costume without you. Oh, well, good. No problem, dear. Have a nice day. With a curt nod and a powerful smile, Izuku took off out of his house, making sure to close his door all the way before leaping off of his third-floor staircase and landing swiftly on the ground below him. Here I come, Yue, he shouted to the sky, taking off into a dead sprint that left some nearby pedestrians questioning his speed. Yep, this is definitely it. Class 1A. Izuku mumbled to himself, standing in front of the unusually large door. For some reason, he couldn't find it in himself to open it and step inside. He wasn't really all that nervous per se, but he was worried about one specific thing. Please let her be in my class. Please let her be in my class. Please let her be in my class. Reaching out and gripping the doorknob tightly, Izuku gulped before opening it up and stepping inside. Wow, so you're that Bakugo guy. The one who got first place in the practical exam. That's so awesome, dude. Super manly. Great. Kaken is in this class. Turning around at the sound of the door opening, the red-haired teen that was praising Bakugo jumped up in excitement when he locked eyes with Izuku, not wasting any time and rushing over to him in a hurry. Whoa, and you're that kid that ran in and stopped the zero-pointer from crushing that girl. Wow, that was the most manly thing I've ever seen. Sorry about freaking out at you over those stolen points. I kinda overreacted. What's your name? Oh, Izuku stammered right off the bat. First off, he wasn't expecting to see Bakugo in the same class as him. And if that wasn't bad enough, he was already being complimented off the bat by a total stranger. These two factors in turn made for quite the brain shortage for the boy as he gathered himself for a response. Haha, you're gonna wanna give him a minute. He gets flustered pretty easily sometimes. Izuku's eyes shot up at the familiar voice as all of his senses turned up to the max. It's her, Kendo-san. You're in my class. Yep, pretty lucky, don't you think? She smiled before turning towards the red-haired boy. Hi, Itsuka Kendo. Nice to meet you. Izuku quickly took the hint as well, introducing himself right after her. Izuku Midoriya. Sorry for the delay. No problem. Both of you are some of the manliest people ever. I was way too scared of that huge zero-pointer to even move. The name's Ijiro Kirishima, by the way. Oh, trust me, I was scared as hell too. I just went in so this weirdo wouldn't get himself killed. Kendo quipped with a bit of mock cockiness. Well, I can't really argue with that, the super-powered teen mumbled as he scratched the back of his head. Again, I really am sorry about taking your points, Kirishima-san. Hey, like I said, man, water under the bridge. Seeing that the conversation was coming to a close, Izuku took a moment to scan around the rest of the classroom. Obviously, he didn't know anyone except Bakugo, who was conveniently looking away from him with a scowl on his face. Luckily, his little conversation with Kendo and Kirishima had gone unnoticed by the rest of the class. Most were divided up into smaller groups like his was so they could get to know each other a little better. Heck, Izuku would have gone back to chatting too if his spider sense didn't begin to tickle him. What the heck? I've never felt it ring so softly before. Oh wow, is that really him? The one who stopped the zero-pointer's foot? Midoriya, watch out. Don't, Kendo warned as fast as she could. But it was too late. Before he could get over his sudden confusion, he found himself shaking hands with a slick-haired blonde boy. Oh, hi, nice to meet you. All right everyone, settle down. A bored voice echoed as a man in a sleeping bag hopped into the classroom. What? You've never seen a tired man before. Whatever, just put these on and head for the PE grounds for your quirk apprehension test. Wait, what? Test? We just got here. The boy with yellow and black hair cried out in horror. Izuku only looked over the PE uniform before locking eyes with Kendo, both of them giving a small shrug before obeying the man along with the rest of the class. Izuku wasn't gonna lie, he kinda felt out of place with his web shooters visible clear as day on his wrist. It was one of the main reasons he liked wearing long-sleeved shirts with them on in the first place. Regardless, he did his best to listen to whom he guessed was his homeroom teacher from his spot next to Kendo. Alright, now that everyone's here, we can begin the examinations. We will be doing the 8 physical tests that you all did in middle school, except this time, you're allowed to use your quirks. Simple as that. I assume there won't be any questions. But much to the chagrin of the neck-wrapped man, a girl with black hair done up in a spiky ponytail raised her hand and waited patiently to be called on. With a very elongated sigh, the long-haired instructor called on the curious student boredly. Yes, excuse me, sir, but will we be making it to the opening ceremony still? Wouldn't it be crucial for us not to miss orientation? Rolling his bagged eyes, Aizawa spoke calmly and harshly at the same time. This is your orientation. and this is what you will be doing today. If you don't want to take it seriously, then go ahead. Just know that whoever gets last place here today will be expelled from the hero course." "What?" the entire class yelled in unison. "Good, I'm glad we understand each other. So no more questions. Let's begin with the 50-meter dash. Who wants to go first?" "What the heck?" No explanation on what he just said. He just moves right on. Izuku thought worriedly, his nerves rising a bit at the new risk that had been added. More upset than him, however, was the black-haired girl that asked the question in the first place. No one paid attention to that though, because soon the first student volunteer stepped forward. "I will, sensei." The same slick-haired blonde boy raised his hand frantically. "It's Aizawa. And you sure are in a hurry, aren't you? Are you on a timer or something?" "Oh, right, Aizawa-sensei. And yes, something like that." "Heh." The baggy-eyed instructor stared blankly at the boy for another few seconds before moving on and getting out his clipboard. "All right, who wants to race against him?" "I will," a pink-bodied girl called out enthusiastically, wasting no time in lining up at the starting line next to the blonde. "All right, Nito Monoma and Mina Ashido, 50-meter dash. Ready, go," Aizawa shouted as he prepared both of his timers. Ashido took off instantly, sliding across the ground on some kind of substance that was coming out of her shoes and picking up tremendous speed. Monoma, on the other hand, was running at a normal human pace. "What the hell? Does his quirk only give strength and not speed?" he thought to himself as he reached the halfway mark of the race. Panic was now beginning to set in for the boy as he threw caution to the wind and jumped as high as he could, reaching out with one arm and pressing his middle and ring finger to his palm, only for him to get 6 inches off the ground and fall flat on his face in a heartbeat. The entire class laughed as the boy got up and finished the race in embarrassment. Mina Ashido, 5.31 seconds. Nito Monoma, 11 seconds flat. "I made a mistake, sensei. Let me try again. Please, I already told you, it's Aizawa-sensei. And no do-overs, sorry. Who wants to go next?" Unfortunately for Aizawa, most of the class was still recovering from laughing so hard at what they just witnessed, with Izuku being the only one who knew exactly what just happened. "Hahaha, he tried using your quirk, Midoriya. That's what his quirk is, he copies the quirk of anyone he touches. Apparently it still needs some work though, haha. He even thought your webs were a part of your quirk like I did. Haha," she explained in between laughs. For some reason, she was really getting a kick out of this. "Oh, so that's why he did that with his hands. Well, I guess that confirms my theory about my powers. If he can't use them, then they must not be a quirk after all. I'll go, Aizawa-sensei." Izuku stepped forward, easily getting the teacher's attention considering he was one of the only ones not laughing. "Midoriya, very well. Who wants to go against him?" Kendo wiped a tear from her eye from her big and hearty laugh while she stepped forward to race Izuku, only to be shoved out of the way by an angry blonde-haired boy who looked just about ready to explode. "Hey," she called out to him, only to be ignored. "I'll take you on, you shitty Deku." "Bakugo, perfect. That gives us number 1 versus number 2. Line up and wait for my signal," Aizawa instructed robotically. Kendo watched the two boys line up while they glared at each other the whole time. What was up with that? Did they know each other? And did he call Midoriya a Deku? What the hell was up with that? But little did the green-haired boy know that Bakugo wasn't the only one glaring daggers into him. Across the field near the finish line, Monoma was giving him a leer that could rival Bakugo's, which in all honesty was quite the impressive feat. Taking his eyes off of his former friend-turned-bully, Izuku faced forward and prepared himself. "I can do this. I know I can do this, and that's all that matters," he repeated in his head, successfully calming his nerves as he took a deep breath and took a starting position. Izuku, Midoriya, and Katsuki Bakugo 50-meter dash. Ready, go. In the blink of an eye, Izuku took off in a dead sprint as fast as he could, the all too familiar sounds of explosions ringing in his ear as he heard Bakugo hot on his tail. "If I keep running, he'll catch up easily," the boy thought as he calculated the distance he was running in his mind. He was almost halfway to the finish line, a little shorter than he would have liked to pull off something like this, but he was sure he could do it if he used his arms to their full potential. Here goes nothing. With all of the momentum he had gathered in his sprint, Izuku pushed off the ground and leapt as far forward as he could, burning a good 20 meters or so in the blink of an eye before putting his arms up and firing 2 web lines at the ground beyond the finish line. And without missing a beat, the boy pulled as hard as he could on the 2 strands of web, sending him flying forward with both his own force and the added force that the elasticity of his web fluid provided. With his little slingshot experiment a complete success, Izuku looked back to see that he had passed the blonde-haired teen by a good margin, making him grin like an idiot as he crossed the finish line feet first, landing with a clean tumble roll. A moment later, Bakugo passed the finish line as well. Izuku, Midoriya, 4 seconds flat. Katsuki Bakugo, 4.13 seconds. "Yes, I did it." Izuku pumped his fist proudly. Bakugo, on the other hand, looked like he was actually about to burst this time. Or at least he would have, if the teacher hadn't stepped and calmed everyone down. All right, relax. Who's next? And just like that, the next two contestants lined up and prepared themselves to race. This went on until everyone had taken their turn so they could move on to the next test, with most of the class now keeping an eye out for the top two in the practical exam who were now proven threats. Next up, we have the softball throw. While Aizawa explained the rules and called up the first student, Izuku felt someone tap on his shoulder, smiling when he turned to see Kendo behind him. That was pretty clever what you did in that race of yours. I guess you won't be going home today, huh? And no. It was really nothing. Trust me, Kendo-san. All I really did was calculate my jump and how hard I could pull my own weight. Trust me, it was simple. The girl chuckled a bit at the way he just word-dumped everything. Yeah, my bad. That sounds so simple, she said sarcastically. Boom. The pair cut their little sidebar immediately and looked up to see what appeared to a softball flying into orbit. And to everyone but Izuku's surprise, it was Bakugo's cocky smirk on the back end of that throw. What the hell? Kirishima yelled in awe. I can't even see it anymore. 705.2 meters. Impressive, Aizawa muttered. Of all the Class 1A students, Kendo seemed to be the only one not impressed. Think you can beat that one, nerd? Izuku audibly gulped before stepping forward and volunteering, his eyes getting ever more serious the closer he got to the designated circle. Number 2 again. Have at it, Aizawa encouraged, tossing the boy a softball. Izuku stayed silent as he caught the ball and stared down at the circle he was standing in, an idea quickly popping into his head. Aizawa-sensei, do I have to stay inside the border if I jump? As long as you land in the circle, I don't care what you do. Go for it. Smiling confidently, Izuku wasted no time in jumping forward as far as he could, very similarly to his last one. Waiting until he hit his peak, the super-powered teen cocked back his right arm and prepared to throw, letting it rip when he was at the highest point in his jump. Putting all of his strength into the throw, Izuku smiled as it vanished into the air almost instantly, pausing his little celebration to turn around in midair and fire a web line at the circle, allowing him to pull himself back and land on his feet with a graceful backflip. 1279 meters. Aizawa choked out through wide eyes. What the hell was that? Rather than freaking out again like they did with the surprise pressure that came with these tests, the entire class just stood there with absolute astonishment on their faces, unable to believe what they just saw. That's almost a whole American mile. A girl with horns muttered aloud in very rough Japanese. No one, however, was more surprised than the furious-looking blonde that was already red in the face and ready to explode. In fact, he would have exploded had it not been for a student who spoke up and asked exactly what he was wondering. What the hell was that, man? What kind of quirk do you have? A small boy with purple orbs on his head asked in desperation. Already having figured this would be coming, Izuku had prepared himself mentally to explain himself. But now that he was facing the crowd head-on, he wasn't so eager anymore. Huh? Oh yeah, my quirk, it's called spider. Basically I can do anything a spider can. Like stick to walls and stuff. Heh. It's weird since it's a mutant type so it's hard to explain. The whole class looked at him like that was not enough information at all, with Kendo even shaking her head with her palm on her forehead. Why does he suck at explaining his quirk so much? Luckily for the poor boy, one familiar student cleared everything up for the rest of her class with her wide array of knowledge. I see. Most spiders can lift up multiple times their own body weight, so given that you're a mutant type, it would make sense that you would be given the proportionate strength of a spider. Izuku was a bit taken aback by how informed the girl was. She might actually give me a run for my money in the classroom. Yeah, exactly. It's just like that, he complimented, receiving only a nod from the somewhat serious girl. The very same girl who had asked Aizawa-sensei the initial question before all of the tests began. Wait a minute, that doesn't explain why he gets to cheat and use support items. Monoma yelled accusingly as he spotted the items on the boy's wrist. If only he'd seen them sooner, it would have made his day a lot less embarrassing. I'm not cheating, I registered these. They're my web shooters and I made them myself. They wouldn't have let me use them otherwise. The boy responded calmly. Walking up and grabbing the green-haired boy's shoulder, Aizawa spoke. I'm gonna need to see a registry note, Midoriya. Izuku shrugged and casually reached into his pocket, pulling out the little slip of paper and showing it to his professor. After taking just one glance at it, Aizawa handed it back to him, nodding in approval at what the boy said earlier. All right then, very impressive, Midoriya. On all fronts, both physical and mental. Keep it up. Now who's next? As the next student moved up to throw the softball, Izuku was pelted with questions as he walked back into the crowd, most of which he just shrugged off and answered with simple responses. In all honesty, the attention was kinda suffocating. He had no idea how Peter thrived so much in outgoing situations like this. One specific student who had his eyes wide with both hate and amazement was Bakugo, even now that everything had been explained properly. He still couldn't comprehend how Izuku had such a strong quirk. At the very least, the blonde held back his tongue for now. He had gotten his explanation at least. Now all that was left was confronting Deku, and that could wait for later. The rest of the tests went by relatively quickly, with Izuku's powers being perfect for dominating each one. In the standing long jump, he had easily cleared the sandbox, which in hindsight wasn't all that impressive since most students did so as well, but it was still worth mentioning. On the repeated side steps, only one student managed to best his quick feet, a small purple-haired boy who used his quirk to bounce from side to side over the lines at an incredible pace. On the grip strength test, he had somehow managed to destroy the small handheld device before it could even get a reading on him, leaving everyone in shock once again. The only other student who had the same outcome with their own grip strength device was Kendo, who crushed it to pieces with her enlarged hand. It went without saying that both she and Izuku were given max scores by Aizawa-sensei. Next was probably the exercise that was least affected by quirk usage, the seated toe touch. In middle school, it was meant to display flexibility in students and test them on that alone. And flexibility wasn't really something that most quirks could affect in any significant way. Needless to say though, Izuku's spider training had done him well in not only making him more agile, but also more flexible, giving him the perfect amount of bend at the waist to reach all the way past his toes and scoring the most points possible. The last two tests were ones that his spider powers were able to handle all by themselves, with the distance run leaving only him and the intelligent girl, Momoye Urazu, as the last two people on the track running laps. Well, she wasn't really running as much as riding an electric scooter boredly while she waited for him to tire out, which, by the way, was still a long time coming. He'd been going strong for almost an entire hour without even breaking a sweat in his steady jog. Even the boy with an ice quirk who was just gliding along a streak of ice had given up a while back, half of his body becoming frozen as he reached his limit. What is that? 70 laps now. That girl is gonna run out of power in that thing before he tires out, Ashido mentioned to no one in particular, getting a hefty nod from the rest of the class. I'll say, she couldn't at least pick something cooler like a chopper. Why'd she go with a lame old scooter? Kendo added pointlessly. Eventually, Aizawa-sensei ended up stopping the two students at 100 laps. Having seen enough to be satisfied and then some, the board instructor simply gave them both max points. It was the same story as well on the sit-ups. Are you tired yet? I'm getting bored of holding your feet down, Kendo complained from her spot on the floor in front of Izuku. Sorry Kendo-san, but I feel fine. And it was the truth. He had lost track at around sit-up number 200 and was just continuing until Aizawa-sensei stopped him like on the distance run. Alright, that's enough showing off, Midoriya. You're finished. 300 sit-ups. Everyone gather around while I count up the scores. I'll post them here in a minute. Izuku gave a little half grin at his teacher's words before he noticed a hand in front of him, taking it without hesitation and pulling himself up with it. Thanks Kendo-san. Don't mention she began before being pulled off to the side and away from the green-haired boy. After gaining her bearings again, the orange-haired girl looked around to see that she was surrounded by most of the girls in her class, with the pink-skinned girl and the invisible girl taking the lead and getting in her personal space. Kendo-chan, you were holding Midoriya's legs while he did his sit-ups. You have to tell us, how amazing were his abs? Ashido asked slyly. What? Itsuka stuttered as her cheeks gained color. Oh come on. We know his shirt must have slipped up at some point. He did 300 of those without even breaking a sweat. He must be absolutely shredded. A girl who was completely invisible said dreamily. Although no one could really see her facial expression, it was obvious that she was at least pleased with her imagination. Guys, what the hell? I wasn't peeking at his abs like that. I'm not a weirdo. Technically, not looking would make you the weirdo. We are girls after all, Jiro. An odd-faced girl with her tongue hanging out mentioned. Okay, I am not doing this right now. Nope, I hate girl talk. Go get your gossip from someone else. Kendo finished and walked away, trying her hardest to wipe the blush from her cheeks on her way back to Izuku. Kendo-san, what was that all about? Don't worry about it. Let's just go see our results, she said in a tone that came as more of a demand than a suggestion. Alright, everyone settle down, or I actually will expel one of you, the bored-looking man muttered aloud, making the entire class look at him in confusion. Wait, what? A yellow and black-haired boy scratched his head as his mind danced in circles. What does that mean? Meanwhile, many of the other students were already sighing in relief. It means he was lying about expelling last place. Stupid, a purple-haired girl with earphone jacks for ears stated, attempting to catch the slower boy up. Correct. I may not have been completely honest with you all on that, but you deserved it. Don't ever take anything we do in this class as anything less than deadly serious. Got that? Yes, sensei. Good. But that's the end of my rational deceptions for now. These scores are all 100% real. So take them that way, he continued in his low, raspy voice while pulling out a phone-looking device and pressing in some commands. Before long, a blue projection appeared from the handheld device, showing a list of 20 names ranked from first to last. 1. Izuku Midoriya. 2. Momoye Urazu. 3. Shoto Todoroki. 4. Katsuki Bakugo. 5. Itsuka Kendo. 6. Fumikage Takoyami. 7. Ijiro Kirishima. 8. Tetsu. 9. Mina Ashido. 10. Ponitsu no Tori. 11. Tsuyu Asui. 12. Kajiro Bondo. 13. Hanta Siro. 14. Shinkaibara. 15. Yostu Awase. 16. Kyoka Jiro. 17. Denki Kaminari. 18. Toru Hagakure. 19. Nito Monoma. 20. Minoru Mainta. Oh, thank goodness. The last place student, Mainta yelled flamboyantly, falling to his knees and looking up to the sky with tears in his eyes. I would have been expelled if Sensei wasn't lying. While some students had more extreme reactions like Mainta, for the most part, everyone else just nodded in satisfaction at the table of names. Nice, Midoriya. You got first. Can't really say I'm surprised after watching your performance, but still, great job, Kendo mentioned genuinely, getting a nod as well from Kirishima. Thanks Kendo-san, Izuku mumbled back, still trying to digest the fact that he had beaten Bakugo at something. And speaking of the angry blonde, his face was among the few dissatisfied looks that were spread among the class as well. His forehead vein couldn't possibly get any bigger right about now. He would be getting his answers all right, no matter how long it took. You won't beat me again, you stupid fucking Deku. Another student who wasn't looking too cheerful at the moment was Yae Urazu, who looked on at Izuku with uncertain eyes that showed she didn't exactly welcome competition. I'll just have to try even harder in class. Alright, that's it for today. Hit the locker rooms and change back into your uniforms. I doubt you'll make the opening ceremony, but you're welcome to try. See you tomorrow for our first day of class, Aizawa ordered in his monotone voice as he walked off the PE grounds. As all of the students nodded and made their trek back to the locker rooms, Aizawa sighed when he noticed the tall muscular figure waiting for him behind some bushes next to the school's entrance. Psst, Aizawa, over here, the enormous man whispered loudly. Rolling his eyes, the baggy-eyed man continued walking, only being forced to stop when the larger man jumped in front of him. So, did you do it? All Might asked curiously, his winning smile faltering for a moment. Yes, I did, multiple times. It didn't work. See, I told you, there's something fishy going on with that boy. He must have a connection to All for One. How else could he avoid your erasure? Aizawa had been given a rough outline about who this All for One was when he was given this task by the symbol of peace. And to be honest, his whole theory sounded like one big load of crap. But the director had stepped in directly and all but forced him to go along with it, so here he was. Look, All Might, I understand why you want to keep your condition and this big villain a secret from everyone, but I don't want to be dragged into any of this unless I absolutely have to. So can you please explain to me why my quirk not working on this Midoriya kid is such vital information? Because it reeks of All for One. First, this boy shows up randomly with a brand new quirk after being quirkless his whole life, and now it can't even be affected by your famous erasure. This doesn't make any sense, and that's what makes me so worried. Still keeping an even face, Aizawa took his turn to speak. Or, just hear me out. My quirk doesn't affect him because he's a mutant type. Yep, he said it himself. And it's common knowledge that my erasure doesn't affect those types of quirks. It's also common knowledge that mutant types are the class of quirks that scientists know the least about. So no matter how weird it may sound to us, developing a quirk later on in life could be a very real possibility for mutant types. This left the number one hero absolutely speechless, giving the erasure hero the perfect opportunity to begin walking away. Trust me, All Might, I think it's weird too, so don't worry. Just don't do anything stupid and let the situation play out. I'm sure if we keep on watching quietly we can figure this thing out before taking action. Watching the quiet man leave silently, All Might shrunk down to his true form, letting the words he just heard sink in properly. Just watch quietly. Well, he had never been one to do anything quietly, that was for sure. Sighing somewhat exhaustedly, Izuku made his way down the winding hallways of UA in search of a specific classroom. After their little surprise exam and the opening ceremony concluded, students were able to go around and get a little bit more familiar with the number one hero school personally, with many more tours and different orientations being offered to those who wanted them. But right now, all of that was over and the sun was beginning to set on the horizon, something that Izuku was well aware of once he yawned for what felt like that third time in a row recently. It wasn't until the green-haired boy spotted the room he was looking for that he quickly jolted himself awake and began moving in its direction, his mind once again going over the checklist of things that he needed to collect. See, one thing that the boy had paid extra attention to today during orientation was the incredible fact that the school was footing the bill for any and all hero-related support. which was exactly the reason he had stayed behind after everything ended to come and visit the workshop in the support department. Stepping right up to the large metal doors, Izuku knocked and waited for a moment, completely losing his breath when he saw who answered the doors. "What do you need, kid? I'm kinda busy at the moment with a special little student of mine," the unusually short man complained, a pang of metal falling down echoing in the classroom behind him. "Ugh, can't she go 5 minutes without touching anything?" But Izuku was too caught up in his swirling thoughts to hear the man's muttered complaint. Instead, he was staring with wide eyes ready to burst from excitement. He would recognize that yellow helmet anywhere, and those caps on his fingertips as well. Your power loader, the excavation hero. Oh wow, I'm a huge fan. I studied the blueprints and designs of your power suit religiously when I was still learning mechanical engineering. This is amazing. You're really a teacher at UA. Suddenly, the noise in the background of the classroom came to a pause as Power Loader smiled widely at the newcomer's words. "Ah, I see. You read my designs. And you understood them." "Understood them. I used them as a basis for my own project." "It really is an honor, Power Loader Sensei." Well, this was certainly a surprise. Who could this boy be? He was sure that he wasn't missing a student, unless that furball Nezu was pulling his leg and giving him an extra spot in one of his classes. Either way, though, he was impressed, so maybe it couldn't hurt to at least hear the boy out. "Cut the formalities, kid. We're not doing hero work. Mr. Majima will do just fine." "All right. Forgive me, Majima-sensei." Yeah, whatever. So what are you doing here anyway?" "All of my support course classes are full. Are you from general studies or something?" And no, I'm actually from the hero course. I came to talk to you about unlimited lab supplies." "What? Hero course? Shouldn't you be more worried about punching and kicking stuff than working in a shop? What's up with that, kid?" "Oh, well, I actually made all of my own gear, including my costume." Narrowing his eyes a bit, the excavation hero waited a moment, signaling the boy to continue. "Right, well, I was wondering if I could have some of the supplies on this list. It's just chemicals for the most part. I hope it's not too much trouble." Taking the sheet of paper from the boy, Mr. Majima looked it up and down with great detail. "Liquid cement. What the hell? Yes, I can confirm that we do have everything on this list, but you aren't a support course student, so I can't just hand them out to you willy-nilly. What do you need them for?" "Oh, right. Do you think I could, come inside to a desk? I don't want to get in trouble bringing these out in the hallway." "Of course, go right ahead." The smaller man shrugged, keeping his eyes on the boy as he found a workbench and pulled something out of his backpack. Izuku took a moment to widen his eyes in awe at the complexity of the workshop while he pulled out his prized invention. Now this is a workshop. I'd have to be filthy rich to afford something like this. Another odd thing that Izuku noticed was the presence of a pink-haired girl in the corner of the room staring him down with serious yellow eyes. It appeared as though she had been in the middle of tinkering with something in her little sectioned-off corner of madness. But now all of her focus was on him, with a look that Izuku couldn't seem to read for the life of him. "Okay, that's kinda creepy," was his final thought before finally pulling out his pair of support items and clicking them onto his wrists. "So, these are my support items, Majima-sensei. I made them myself and even got them registered for my hero classes." "Yeah, I can see that, kid, but what are they?" "Cut to the chase already," the small instructor said somewhat impatiently. In all honesty, he didn't expect much out of whatever those bracers were. This was a hero course student after all, and they weren't really known for using their brains too often. "All right, sorry. I call them my web shooters. My whole quirk and hero persona is centered around being agile and spider-like, so I created these to help me out with that. Do you mind if I demonstrate them for you? They aren't destructive." Now paying a little more attention than before, the excavation hero answered immediately. His curiosity started to get the better of him. "Yeah, go for it, kid." Smiling at the man, Izuku turned to see that the pink-haired girl from before was also on the edge of her seat waiting for his showing. "Great, here goes." Thwip. Firing a web line at the ceiling above him, Izuku didn't hesitate to pull himself up and hang from it upside down, showing off the weight that his web fluid could hold. "If I hold the trigger down, it fires a web line, which I can use in battle or even to support my weight and swing from." Before anyone could respond, Izuku brought up his other hand while holding himself up with the other, shooting a blob of webbing at the wall across the room. "But if I just tap the trigger, it shoots out in more of a ball-like consistency, making it a perfect adhesive projectile." Now staring at the boy with his mouth agape, the excavation hero held his head, words evading him as he tried processing exactly what he just saw. "Wow, what a super cute baby," the pink-haired girl yelled out as she ran towards the wall where Izuku had shot his web. Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth, May. And here I thought hero course students were all brawn and no brain. What's your name, son?" "Izuku Midoriya, sir," the green-haired boy stated happily, letting go of his web line and falling to the floor elegantly. "Well then, Midoriya, you sure do have something here. This is incredible. Are those completely mechanical?" I don't see a single speck of light coming from those things. Oh yeah, I designed them like that. I didn't want to get into anything electrical. Otherwise they would have taken me even longer. Plus, I figured if I messed up on the waterproofing I would just end up ruining them anytime they got wet. That was a wise decision. Nothing beats the good old classics. Tangling with the hazard of getting shocked is a whole new rodeo when tinkering with things. Good instincts. Thanks Majima-sensei, he said awkwardly, doing his best to shrug the compliment off and regain focus. Whoa, that really is a strong adhesive. The two men turned to where the pink-haired girl was and widened their eyes at the circumstance she was in. May, what did I tell you about touching random stuff you don't know about? Izuku, on the other hand, just scratched the back of his head sheepishly at the girl's odd position. It seemed that she had gotten her whole arm stuck to the wall in her search to find answers, which honestly, he was getting used to. It always seemed like someone's first instinct when seeing his webbing was to reach out and touch it. Ah crap, Majima grumbled as his attempt to pull his student off of the wall failed. Hey Midoriya, how do you loosen this stuff? Haha, well, that's the thing. I created the formula to be as strong as possible while still maintaining as much elasticity as I could. So unless she has a strength quirk, she's gonna be stuck there for about an hour. An hour. What happens then? That's about how long it takes for it to dissolve. I figured this would happen a lot, so I didn't make it permanent on purpose. Widening his eyes yet again and nodding his head in approval, Mr. Majima walked back to the boy and read over the list again, this time giving him a big thumbs up. Wow, alrighty then Midoriya, you've convinced me. I'll get you everything on this list. No problem. I'm guessing that these chemicals are for making that substance of yours. Yes, sir, the super-powered teen exclaimed cheerfully, bouncing on the balls of his feet in excitement. I already have the formula written down and memorized if you want to see it as proof. Chuckling slightly, the excavation hero opened up a cabinet and collected a large tray, promptly giving it to the boy with a winning smile. Don't worry about it, kid, I believe you. Now come on, I'll show you to where we keep just about every chemical known to man. You can pick out what you need and be on your way. Really, thank you so much Majima-sensei. Hehe, it's no problem kid. I'm honestly surprised that you were even able to make that stuff on your own. The chemicals alone must have cost a fortune. Yeah, they really did. Up until now I've been really trying to conserve my web fluid. It really hurt my wallet every time I ran out. Heh. Well, don't you worry about that anymore Midoriya, Power Loader declared, grabbing some keys off his desk and beginning to walk towards the doors. We'll take good care of you here at the support department. Izuku couldn't wipe the grin off his face if he tried. This was incredible. Finally, no more empty wallets. Hey, Majima-sensei, what about me? I want to get a good look at the web babies. May complained from her spot on the wall. Well maybe this'll teach you to stop being so curious all the time. You heard Midoriya, you've got time out for 1 hour, and I don't think he's gonna sit around and wait. The instructor laughed as he walked out of the classroom with Izuku in tow. Oh man, those babies were extra cute too. Izuku woke up groggily to the sound of his phone's alarm screeching painfully into his sensitive ears. Normally, the device was placed away from his head and on his nightstand while he slept, but last night had not been a normal night. Ugh. The boy groaned as he picked up his phone and shut off the alarm, his eyes shooting open all the way as he checked the time as well. Shit, that was my backup alarm. He yelled out in realization, quickly getting up from his messy workbench and looking for his uniform. See, since the super-powered teen had just gotten a shiny new set of chemicals from the UA support department, he had immediately begun mass-producing as much web fluid as humanly possible right when he got home yesterday, which in all honesty, he loved doing, no matter how time-consuming it could be. Mixing the chemicals and synthesizing the fluid mixture was easy enough, but actually getting the stuff into the tiny little capsules, now that took both time and finesse. The only place that the green-haired boy miscalculated was in his estimated time of quitting and going to bed, in which he obviously pushed it a little too far and overslept his first alarm for school. Now fully dressed in his gray UA uniform, Izuku rushed out of his room and quickly said goodbye to his mom. Once he was outside his apartment, he quickly finished snapping on his web shooters before perching onto the railing of the building's stairs. I don't have a choice, I have to web swing to school. The train is already long gone, and class starts in 15 minutes. The teen thought rapidly as he checked his phone one more time. Izuku knew the risks of getting caught for quirk usage in public, but frankly, he didn't care anymore. He had gone out web swinging plenty of times before, back when he was still learning how to do it. Sure, he'd had a few close calls here and there where he had to speed up and hide to get a pro hero off his tail, but that ended up being more fun and thrilling to him than scary and cautioning. It's not a big deal. After all, Peter breaks the law all the time just by being a hero in his world. What would he think of me if I was too scared to just web swing? Izuku thought comically to himself, a somewhat cocky smirk making its way onto his lips. However fictional Peter Parker may have been, he was still like a mentor to the young green-haired boy. and he wasn't about to shy away from something that the comic book character made look easy. Making up his mind, Izuku turned around on his perch to face his apartment building, not wasting another second and jumping up and clinging to the wall above his door. Once the boy had crawled up to the roof of his building, he immediately started sprinting, giving himself a running start before leaping off the building and beginning his swing. This would never get old, walking through the gates of UA at a steady pace. Itsuka Kendo was silent as a plethora of thoughts swam around in her mind, most of which were centered around a plain-looking green-haired boy and his second absence in a row. Not only was he not on the train this morning on the way to school, but yesterday when she had waited after orientation to walk home with him, he was nowhere to be found. It wasn't the biggest deal in the world to her, she just found it odd. The only reason she had even waited in the first place was because he was one of the only people in her class that she felt somewhat familiar with. Well, that, and the fact that they took the same train to get home. Maybe he took a different train today. Before long, though, the girl's thoughts evaporated as she heard an all-too-familiar sound come from behind her. Thwip. Yep, just as she expected. When she turned around, there he was, the person she was just thinking about, detaching from his final web line. Izuku kicked off the arc and flew forward as fast as he could, riding this last bit of momentum for as long as possible. Seeing that he was going to end up a bit short of the campus, the green-haired boy entered a headfirst dive and landed hands first onto the blue outline of UAS main gate, pushing off with his arms and landing in a steady perch crouch right in front of the orange-haired girl. "Oh, hey Kendo-san," Izuku said casually with a bit of sweat on his face. The girl, on the other hand, was not so casual, looking around frantically and sighing in relief when she noticed they were alone. "Midoriya, what the hell was that? Are you trying to get in trouble?" Slowly unclipping and taking off his web shooters, Izuku's smile only grew, riding out the wave of adrenaline and confidence to the fullest. Can't get in trouble if I don't get caught." Again, this only seemed to further confuse the girl as his demeanor did another sudden 180. What is with this guy? It's almost like he's two different people. Wasting no time, however, Kendo matched his smirk, almost challenging the boy as she tried to one-up him. "HMPH, fine, that's fair. I guess I'll just stop waiting for you after school if you're just gonna swing home every day now." Instantly widening his eyes, Izuku's brave face faltered as nerves hit him like a truck. What? Why you waited for me? When? What are you talking about? Why did? Haha. You should see your face right now. Kendo laughed, seeing his panicked expression. Izuku responded, completely lost at the moment. Rolling her teal eyes at the boy, Kendo quickly began walking towards the school again, motioning to the boy with her hand to join her. "Come on, let's walk and talk. I'm already late enough thanks to that stupid train delay." "Oh, what? The train had a delay. I could have made it," Izuku complained as he caught up with the girl. Is that why you swung to school? Gotta hand it to you, that's gutsy." "Yeah, I overslept a little. Got caught up making web fluid all night since the school gave me all the chemicals I needed." "Oh wow, they're supplying you with chemicals for free?" the girl inquired as they walked into the school. "Yeah, isn't it great? I used to burn through cash all the time on just raw chemicals, but the school said since it was for a support item, they would give me anything I needed. That's actually where I was after orientation yesterday, the support department. Sorry if I kept you waiting," Izuku said sheepishly while scratching his head. "Oh wow, that's awesome, dude. And don't worry about it. I'm just glad you didn't ditch me on purpose," she jabbed playfully. "Of course not. I'll be there today, I promise." Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it." Just as the two wrapped up their friendly conversation, they arrived at the large door of Class 1 and stepped inside, still bustling around with chatter and background noise. No one in the class really took notice when the pair walked in together. There were still a couple minutes left until the bell, and everyone was pretty much out and about, so it was impossible to know which seats were taken. "Oh good, looks like we weren't too late," Kendo remarked happily, earning a small nod from Izuku as he met a pair of red eyes from across the class. Not backing down, the green-haired teen matched the rival blonde's intense glare, holding it for quite a while without so much as blinking. After a while, Kendo noticed the boy's silence and looked over at him, growing curious when she saw that he was sharing a dirty look with Bakugo again. She was about to stomp out her curiosity once and for all and ask the boy what his relation to the blonde was. But just like yesterday, Aizawa-sensei came out of nowhere. "All right, settle down everyone, take your seats," he said in his normal monotone voice. Itsuka shook her head in frustration before walking away from Izuku and finding the seat she had sat in briefly yesterday. She wasn't gonna forget about this, she was getting her answers, one way or another. Izuku froze when he heard the voice of his instructor from behind him, breaking eye contact with Bakugo and looking around the room. It looked like even Kendo had already found a seat closer to the middle of the classroom. When did that happen? "Well, Midoriya, you want me to repeat myself? Take a seat. Look at that. There's an open one right behind your friend Bakugo there. Of course, the only open seat is near Kaken. Crap. Class 1A's first homeroom class passed by with very minimal commotion. The only thing that stood out to the students was a promise made by Aizawa-sensei saying that their hero studies class after lunch would be quite eventful. With that in mind, it was obvious that most of the class was on edge, especially with the dark and unreadable nature of their homeroom teacher. To them, anything was possible at this point. Plus, it didn't help that their last class before lunch today was something dull in the form of math. But here they were, bored out of their minds as their math teacher gave out instructions. "Alright class, I'm gonna keep things simple." The low and foggy voice of the pro-hero Ectoplasm began in an even tone. "I know you all have already done that meet and greet crap in other classes, so let's skip that part. I'm Ectoplasm. I don't care if you call me sensei or not, just as long as you all shut up and pay attention." The majority of the students nodded at the man's straightforward approach. They had already spent most of the day just messing around and learning each other's names and other types of first-day nonsense. So, it was nice to have a small break from that. This was the collective thought among most 1A students. That is, until the prosthetic-wearing hero revealed what they were doing today. Dropping a stack of papers on his desk, Ectoplasm opened his mouth and dispensed out clones in order to pass out the packets in a quick and orderly fashion, effectively impressing and confusing the students receiving them. "As you can all see, my clones are passing out your preliminary math exams. You may begin as soon as you receive them, and you may leave as soon as you complete them. So hurry it up. I'm sure you all want some extra lunchtime, right?" Most of the class didn't even bother showing emotion at the instructor's final question, still reeling from the fact that they were taking a test so soon. What? A test? On the first day? What the hell, man? The yellow and black-haired teen known as Kaminari thought out loud. "Yeah, we haven't even learned anything yet. This is unfair," Minda complained alongside him, sighing deeply. The pro-hero resisted the urge to grab the bridge of his nose, already seeing that some of these kids weren't so bright. "Correct, you haven't learned anything yet, which is why this is a preliminary exam. It's supposed to show me where everyone is at in terms of knowledge in mathematics, which in turn will help me determine a proper pace to teach everyone effectively." However, while many sighs of relief came out around the class, Kaminari was still looking totally clueless as to what the teacher was getting. What? Getting promptly smacked across the head by one purple-haired Kyoka Gyro. The yellow and black-haired teen cried out in pain. "It's not for a grade, Lightning, but now stop being a dumbbass." Seeing this, the prosthetic-using teacher could help but chuckle at the antics of his new class. This was certainly guaranteed to be an interesting year. "Very well then, please quiet down and begin." As the class collectively put their heads down and began working, Ectoplasm looked around to try and observe what he could. For one, he saw the yellow-haired boy from before practically pull his hair out while looking at a problem. This made the man chuckle a bit as he also noticed a red-haired boy and an invisible girl show some signs of struggle as well. The test wasn't designed to be impossible, but it sure as heck wasn't easy. He had made sure to put in a couple of problems that even a college-level math graduate would have some trouble with, which was why he was so taken aback when the first exam was handed back to him only 15 minutes into class. The pro-hero read the name at the top of the page and looked up to make eye contact with the boy. Was he serious? Izuku Midoriya. Ectoplasm thought to himself as the boy took a bow and walked out the door. Looking deeper through the test, the pro-hero made sure that he wasn't being pranked by being handed a blank test. But every problem that he looked through on any given page only left him more and more stunned. He didn't know for sure until he graded it fully later, but this boy was at least close to a perfect score. With shock still obvious on his face, Ectoplasm brought his eyes back up to the class where most students were still focused on their tests. This was incredible. It looked like he already had a star pupil. Only a couple pairs of eyes stayed up and looked at the door that Izuku just walked out. One from an angry Bakugo, and one from an unsure Yaoyorozu. Izuku sat quietly on the edge of his seat alone at his lunch table. He was, of course, very grateful to Ectoplasm Sensei for giving his class the opportunity to have extra time at lunch, but he didn't expect for the test to be so rudimentary. So now, here he was sitting alone in a half-empty lunchroom reading comics with an empty bowl of finished katsudon off to the side. Shaking away the insignificant thoughts, the green-haired boy focused back up on the piece of literature in his hands. Currently, he was flipping through Amazing Spider-Man number 122, and rereading this one always managed to get him to feel bad for Peter. In this specific issue, Peter had failed to save his girlfriend at the time, and as a result, she was killed by a villain out of pure spite. The first time he had read this story, the boy had cried for hours. This, of course, was back when he was still doing his spider training and burning through comics like nobody's business. The mysterious box he'd found had come with exactly 300 Spider-Man comics, counting Amazing Fantasy number 50. Which really annoyed Izuku, because that made it to where the last issue of Amazing Spider-Man that was in the box was number 299. And number 299 left him on a huge cliffhanger regarding an alien symbiote breaking into Peter's home and scaring his wife, Mary Jane. halting his thoughts immediately. Izuku shook his head at his frustrations with the comics. Okay, I need to calm down before I become some kind of super nerd. Anyways, now he just reread all of the comics so he could possibly try to catch anything he might have missed through his first run. That, and he obviously loved seeing Peter's amazing adventures as well. There was also the mystery of the 3 VHS tapes marked 1, 2, and 3 that were also inside the strange box, but those had just been sitting in his room collecting dust these past 10 months. Because much to his disappointment, nowhere he went had a single VHS player in stock. He understood, of course, that it was dead hardware, but it still didn't make it any less crappy knowing there was something he was missing. Either way, though, he didn't get much more reading done, because his classmates were beginning to show up in the lunchroom at a steady pace, and more specifically, Kendo was now making her way over to him with a tray of food in hand. Widening his eyes, Izuku scrambled to put away the delicate comic book, doing his best to look as casual as possible when the orange-haired girl arrived. "Sup, Midoriya, mind if I sit here?" This caught the green-haired boy completely off guard, leaving him staring blankly for a solid few seconds. He had assumed that she was just coming over here to ask him something. Why did she want to sit with him? No one ever wanted to sit with him. Ever. Lunch had always just been his fantasize about heroes by yourself for an hour time. Ooh, what? Izuku squeaked out. Looking at the boy oddly, Kendo spoke again. Do you mind if I sit with you? And no, sorry, I heard you. I'm just not used to anyone sitting with me at lunch. Are you sure? Giving the boy a blank look, Kendo sat down without another word, staring her teal eyes straight into his emerald ones for a few moments, as if trying to read him. He really could be confusing sometimes, but she was determined to figure him out, and she was sure that a big piece of that would come from information about a certain red-eyed blonde boy. Starting to feel uncomfortable from the silent staring, Izuku opened his mouth to try and break the silence. Kendo-san, is something wrong? Not missing a beat, the orange-haired teen replied. Nope, she said casually, placing some food in her mouth and chewing before talking again. I was just wondering how you knew Bakugo. You two are always giving each other dirty looks. Oh, Izuku choked out dryly, not really knowing how to respond to the sudden question. Slightly surprised at how long the boy was taking, Kendo looked at him worriedly as he eyed the floor with a frown. Forget I said anything. I understand if it's personal. Making eye contact with her once again, Izuku felt remorse set in at his cowardice to tell the truth. Why was this so hard? It wasn't like it was some huge secret or something. And no, it's okay, Kendo-san, it's not that big a deal. I went to middle school with Kaken. That's how I know him. Kaken, Deku, so are they friends? That's the only explanation for the nicknames, right? Unless Midoriya is calling him that because of an inside joke or something. Not able to hold in her curiosity, Kendo continued with her questioning. Okay, but then why does he call you Deku? He seems way too angry when he says it for it to just be a cute little nickname. This time, Izuku saw the question coming, pausing for a moment before scratching the back of his head to try and play things off. Oh, that. It's not a big deal. He's always called me that since we were kids. He just says it to make fun of me and call me useless. This revelation made the orange-haired teen stop everything for a moment, widening her eyes and putting her food down at the thought. Wait, what? He meant that as an insult. He was just messing around with you though, right? Aren't you friends? When Izuku just stared down at his empty bowl in utter silence, Kendo slowly matched his expression, a frown making its way onto her lips. She understood now, loud and clear. But the big unanswered question now was how. How did someone as strong as Izuku let himself get bullied? She was very much on the verge of asking him and satisfying her curiosity, but she thought better of it. She had already asked enough about his private life, and she didn't want to dig up any more bad memories for the boy. Okay, good, Izuku began again after a long pause, this time sporting a big smile and a thumbs up as the green-haired boy looked back up at her. Because he seems like a massive asshole, she finished with a hefty laugh. In reality, she wouldn't have said anything if he had ended up being Izuku's friend, but now that she knew better, she didn't have to hold back any feelings whatsoever. This brought a small trace of a smile back to the super-powered teen's lips, even pulling a small chuckle from him at the girl's choice of words. Yeah, I guess he really is, huh? Happy to see that the boy was feeling a bit better, Kendo derailed everything and changed the topic of conversation, hoping to see the boy fully forget about her previous nosiness. So, what did you think of that math test we just took? I saw that you were the first to finish it. It was easy. Well, yeah, it wasn't that bad, I guess. A couple of those questions at the end though had me clueless. Those definitely weren't made for first years, don't you think? Yeah, I know what you mean. Narrowing her eyes at the boy, Kendo saw that he was still staring down his finished bowl of food. He obviously still wasn't feeling too great. Either that or he hated talking about math. What was something else she could say that could pull him out of his funk? Oh yeah, Izuku beamed, remembering something very important that was coming up. What do you think the big surprise is for Hero Studies next period? Aizawa-sensei made it sound like it was serious. This seemed to almost instantly perk Izuku up, allowing him to forget about his unknown mental dilemma and make eye contact with the girl. Oh yeah, I was wondering about that too. It'll probably be intense. Like you said, Aizawa-sensei doesn't mess around. And he specifically told us that we would be surprised by who would be teaching us. Yeah, but don't get caught up on that too much, Kendo warned, stopping the boy's train of thought in its tracks. Aizawa-sensei could just be lying to us like yesterday. For all we know, he could come back and be the hero studies teacher himself. I'll never trust what he says again. This made him bust out completely in laughter, earning a beaming smile from the redhead across from him. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess we'll see what happens. We just have to be ready for anything. Sure, they were ready. Ready for an unknown teacher to come through the door and start ruffling some feathers. Ready for the most unexpected of scenarios that UA could throw at them. Hell, they were even ready for Aizawa to come trudging in and declaring that what he said before was another rational deception. But what they weren't ready for was exactly what ended up happening. I am here, a large and flashy man yelled as he burst through the class doors with an even flashier costume to boot. Whoa, it's All Might, Kirishima yelled enthusiastically, stating the obvious. No way, All Might is a teacher at this school. I knew it. So the rumors were true. This is gonna be so cool. A year ago, Izuku would have been just as, if not more excited than his classmates around him to see the symbol of peace. But now, he wasn't feeling the excitement at all, even with the man wearing his iconic Silver Age costume. In fact, the green-haired teen was feeling something more along the lines of dread at having to face All Might again. He's my hero studies teacher. What are the odds? I hope he doesn't recognize me. That would be an awkward conversation. Who was he kidding? All Might probably saw hundreds of faces a day. There was no way he would remember some kid who claimed to be his biggest fan. That's probably what every kid told him. Having cleared up the thoughts going off in his head to a degree, Izuku looked up again and listened closely. He still planned on acing whatever All Might had in store for them. Settle down now, my young students. Yes, it is I, All Might, and I will be your hero studies teacher this year. The symbol of peace paused as the class cheered once again, waiting for it to die back down before speaking again in his signature booming voice. I'm glad you are all as enthusiastic about that as I am. I will be doing the best I can this year to teach each and every one of you all that I can. But that's enough of an introduction, don't you think? The pro hero asked rhetorically, lifting his hand and pressing a button on some sort of remote. Everyone watched in awe as whirring noises began to emit from the wall of the classroom, opening up compartments holding an array of metal briefcases numbered 1 to 20. On the wall to your right you will all find your hero costumes for today's class. Please collect the satchel with your corresponding class number and change in the locker rooms. We're going to training ground beta. The entire class got up in an excited frenzy to collect their beloved hero costumes, something that even Izuku joined in on as he collected his briefcase and joined a smiling Kendo, walking out of the classroom in a par behind everyone else. What the super-powered teen didn't notice, however, was the intense stare that was on him the entire time, courtesy of a certain number 1 hero. Izuku finished up the adjusting of his web shooters as quickly as he could. He was already one of the last boys in the locker room after changing. It seemed that everyone was extremely eager to get started, fidgeting with the devices on his hands while he walked. The green-haired teen began making his way out to training ground beta, figuring he could finish up while he made his way out. He was already clad in his hero costume, a very accurate representation of his fictional mentors, with a few key differences. The first, and most obvious, was the completely different color scheme. Izuku had opted for 2 contrasting shades of green in favor of the classic red and blue, with a light cyan green replacing the red, and a darker green replacing the blue. Another change that he couldn't really avoid were his 2 support items, clearly in view on his wrists. They were now fully adjusted, but still in plain sight. He would have preferred to keep them hidden underneath his costume like Peter did, but that wasn't in the cards for him until he figured out how to make them smaller on his wrists. Other than those small changes, however, Izuku's costume was true to its comic counterpart, even if it did look a bit raggedy on behalf of his novice sewing ability. Quickly doing his best to catch up to the rest of the class, Izuku was one of the last ones to gather around All Might, instantly spotting Kendo's distinguishable orange hair. Kendo-san, Izuku called as he walked up behind her, making her turn to face him. The look on her face said it all as she looked him up and down and inspected his costume closely. Ooh, Midoriya, is that really your costume? She asked, somewhat perplexed. Yeah, isn't it awesome? I made it myself, he exclaimed happily, putting his mask on and posing in front of her. Itsuka, on the other hand, had her head tilted to the side in a bit of confusion. She supposed that him making it himself was the reason it looked so patchy, but still, it did look a bit ridiculous. Hey, I guess with the mask on it does look a little cooler. Made it yourself? Huh. Well, that's pretty neat. I definitely don't think I'm skilled enough for that, she said, gesturing down to her own costume. taking his mask off again and observing the girl's attire. Izuku couldn't help but think that it was the perfect embodiment of both simplicity and complexity all at the same time. Draped over her body was a turquoise kippah that stopped down at her knees along with a black corset tightened firmly around her waist. She also wore a black domino mask over her eyes and turquoise flats that matched the rest of her costume. Overall, it looked very martial artsy. Wow, your costume is awesome, Kendo-san. It really fits. Why? Alright, now that everyone is here, let us begin the battle trial. The symbol of peace boomed excitedly, interrupting the green-haired teen and gaining everyone's attention. Izuku locked his eyes with Kendo's, feeling better when he saw her smiling at him and understanding. Once he had complete and utter silence again, All Might spoke again while throwing out a signature thumbs up. Listen carefully, young heroes, because today we will be practicing something that every hero must know how to do correctly. Battling indoors. Many sounds of elation, confusion, and even dread were heard from the class, but All Might continued his explanation nonetheless. Today's battle trial will have a bit of an American twist to it, with a search and rescue operation to secure a nuclear weapon. The number one hero shouted flamboyantly, striking a pose and waiting for his students to be impressed. Unfortunately, only crickets were heard from the audience, causing All Might to clear his throat and carry on. You will all be going head-to-head in pairs of two, one team as heroes and one team as villains. The heroes must either defeat the villains in combat and secure them with capture tape, or simply secure the nuclear weapon. Naturally, the villains will be doing the opposite, defending the nuclear weapon and taking down the heroes. Any questions? Now that everything was explained properly, everyone in Class 1 was showing pure enthusiasm at their coming trial. Even Minda was pumped up, already going around asking girls to partner with him. In fact, everyone was going around partnering up. Even Izuku found himself looking directly to his right at the orange-haired girl with hope on his face, before he could open his mouth to ask her. However, the loud voice of the symbol of peace shut everyone's partner hunt down instantly. No questions. Good. Then we will begin drawing numbers in order to determine the pairs and the roles. A collective groan rang across the street at the instructor's words as All Might reached in and began the drawing. Not hearing his name for the first few draws, Izuku saw Kendo begin to listen for her name and turned away from her. He might as well use this moment to think about the coming assignment. In theory, this was the perfect test for someone like him. His powers weren't all that destructive to an indoor environment, and his well-roundedness gave him the option to be both sneaky and loud when faced with the task of securing an objective. As a matter of fact, if he didn't know any better, this could have been a scenario right out of Peter's adventures. This was tailor-made for him. Now all he needed was some luck. He'd prefer to be on the hero team for obvious reasons, and he was confident that he could work with anyone in the class barring Bakugo. But since that was only a 1 in 20 chance, the green-haired teen felt pretty good about his odds. His timing was impeccable as well, because right as he finished wrapping up his thoughts, he heard his name boom from the symbol of peace. Next up is Teamy, consisting of Izuku, Midoriya, and Itsuka Kendo. You two will be the hero team. Hearing this, Izuku's neutral face immediately jumped up into a smile as he met her eyes. It looked like luck was finally going his way. And the villain team going up against them will be Katsuki, Bakugo, and Nito Monoma. And just like that, the super-powered teen's smile faltered. Seriously, I'm going up against Kakin already. Quickly diving back into his head, Izuku took this new development in stride, calming his nerves and taking a deep breath. Realistically, he should be okay now. He already laid everything out to his former friend, and he had even beaten him yesterday several times in the quirk apprehension test, so why would this be any different? Oh, who was he kidding? That answer was obvious. This time he'd have 10 months of pent-up rage coming at him in actual combat. Can I beat Kakin in a direct fight? I handled him in that little skirmish in front of our middle school a few days back. But this is different. He didn't use his quirk back then. What if I? Izuku was shaken out of his thoughts by a hand touching his shoulder. Looking up, he saw the familiar teal eyes of his orange-haired classmate right as she began speaking. Come on, Midoriya, didn't you hear All Might? We're up first, let's go kick some ass, she said enthusiastically, without a care in the world. Yeah, let's do it, Izuku replied softly, following her to the entrance of the building. Alright, what's the plan, Midoriya? I know you've got something. Izuku once again shook out of his thoughts and tried to get his head in the game. Why was this bugging him so much? Come on, stop thinking so much. I thought I was over this. Ooh, Midoriya, are you okay? Kendo asked with some concern after his elongated silence. Oh yeah, I'm fine. Let's get to planning. We don't have much time left. The orange-haired teen narrowed her eyes at him suspiciously at his poor attempt to change the subject. But seeing as he was right about them having a limited amount of planning time, she let it slide. Alright, let's hear it. Right, Izuku began, bringing a finger up to his chin and thought. Okay, well let's look at the obvious first. We're going up against Kaken and Monoma-san, so this already isn't gonna be easy. Do you know if Monoma-san has already touched anyone? Going deep in thought for a moment, Kendo shook her head after a while. No, I don't. He wasn't next to us when the teams were being picked. Well that's okay. That doesn't change much, because regardless of who Kaken has as a teammate, I'm pretty confident he's gonna come down after me right away. This got the girl's attention instantly. You really think he would risk his mission like that just to settle the score with you? Huh? Are you kidding? He probably won't even think about the mission at all. I can almost guarantee we'll see him within 5 minutes of entering the building. This made Izuku pause for a moment while she digested this surprising information. What was up with these two? So, what's the plan? I'm sure we can take him down together pretty easily, don't you think? Kendo asked, breaking the silence. I don't know about that. Kaken is really strong. We shouldn't underestimate him. Can you give me a full rundown of your quirk? The orange-haired teen smiled at something familiar being asked of her, and responded without hesitation. Of course, it's called Big Fist. It's pretty much exactly what you've already seen. I can grow my hands and increase my strength with them a lot. Really straightforward and boring, ha. Izuku, on the other hand, was thinking the opposite as he analyzed and brainstormed ideas involving her abilities. Alright then, so I'm guessing you prioritize fighting over everything. Yep, exactly. I'm even a black belt in karate, so I work at my best in close range. Izuku nodded, happy with that response as he formed a plan in his head. Seeing as she was a battle hero, he dismissed the idea of splitting up and sending her for the nuclear weapon alone. She could be a valuable asset against Bakugo if they double-teamed him. This was perfect. Alright, I've got something. Here's what we're gonna do. Alright, you shitty extra. Listen up, cause I'm only gonna say this once. I'm going down there and taking down that shitty Deku once and for all. Got it. I don't give a shit what you do, just don't get in the way. Bakugo yelled with his back turned to his teammate. He was almost the whole way to the exit of the room when he felt a hand on his shoulder stop him momentarily. Relax, tough guy. You misunderstand me completely. What do you say I join you? I've got a bone to pick with Midoriya as well. We can crush him together. Despite not wanting any help at all in his personal endeavor, Katsuki couldn't help but smile a bit at the slyness in the boy's voice. Back with Kendo and Izuku, the pair were both sitting in silence as the last of the 15-minute preparation period drained away. They were both already aware of what the plan was, having just gone over it twice to make sure they were ready. Now they just had to wait. But while Izuku was waiting calmly and eagerly, Izuku was a slightly different story. And the orange-haired teen couldn't help but worry when the boy started mumbling incoherently again. Okay, just calm down. I've gotten past this already. I'm not scared of Kaken. I'm stronger than him now. There's no reason to be thinking about this so much. Everything is gonna go exactly according to plan. Just like I told him. Before, I'm done being his punching bag. Looking like he had gotten his mind in order, Izuku looked forward with fire in his emerald eyes, ready for the battle ahead. However, the quick change in demeanor was not enough to stop Kendo from voicing her concerns. Alright, Midoriya, what's wrong? I know something's up. You've been mumbling to yourself this whole time. Izuku barely caught what she said before she kept going. Is this about facing Bakugo? You can tell me. I'll understand if you're nervous. Well, kinda, but I think I'm okay now. I just needed to get my head straight. I thought I was done with this crap after I beat him in all those tests yesterday. But it looks like there's still some doubt there still. Izuku broke into a small smile at the boy's words, happy that he was finally venting this stuff to her. She was expert on this type of stuff thanks to a certain third year, so she already had the perfect encouragement on deck for him. Good. Just remember to believe in yourself, okay? He's just an asshole. Who cares what someone else thinks? Yeah, I remember. Thanks, Kendo-san. Izuku finished for her and looked forward with brand new hunger. It was as if he had just been reminded of something important. So important, in fact, that he didn't even realize what he said until it was too late. After the girl stayed silent for a while, Izuku slowly crept his wide eyes over her, only to see an emotion that he hoped he was reading wrong. Realization. How did you know I was gonna say that? Izuku scrambled as he looked back and forth between the starting line and the orange-haired girl. Crap. Ooh. Izuku turned back to Kendo, not knowing what to expect from her. Her expression was completely unreadable to him, but after a few seconds of blankly staring, she finally locked eyes with him, and he could have sworn he saw a hint of anger in her teal eyes. Let's go. We're sticking to the plan. But you and I are gonna have a talk later, got it? Izuku gulped at the tone she used. She obviously wasn't asking. So with that, he had seen enough, cutting off eye contact and putting on his mask. Right, of course. Bakugo shuffled carefully through the halls on the first floor of the building as he looked for his green-haired target. He knew Izuku could be crafty at times, so he was actually a bit thankful that he had someone watching his back as they walked. Of course, he would never actually tell the slick-haired blonde he felt this way. But still, we're almost to the entrance, so be ready for anything. If I know that damn Deku Then he's gonna try some shitty strategy or something. Monoma was extremely thankful for the heads up from his battle trial teammate, because with comedic timing, they rounded one last corner only to see the boy in question in quite the particular position, standing there in the narrow hallway alone. Izuku had each hand around a web line stuck to opposing walls, waiting for them with a fully cocked back web slingshot. Bakugo barely had time to widen his eyes in shock when a green blur flew at him with incredible speed, only narrowly managing to dodge the human projectile with his reflexes alone. Monoma, however, wasn't so lucky, taking the full force of the body-flinging attack. The slick-haired blonde was launched back with incredible speed, Izuku connecting with him feet first and shooting him straight into an opposing wall. For a moment, when Izuku landed softly back on the floor, he wondered if he'd gone overboard and really hurt his classmate. But those thoughts quickly vanished when the smoke cleared and something unexpected emerged. It was Monoma all right, but he was silver. Hahaha. Is that the best you can do, Midoriya? I barely felt that. The boy mocked out loud, doing his best to convey to his classmate that his attack was weak. In reality, though, his thoughts were saying the opposite. Fuck, that hurt. He's really damn strong. Shame I can't copy him since he's a mutant type. Now finding himself surrounded by the silver boy and his former friend turned bully, Izuku sprung to life once again as his spider sense blared in his head. Die, Deku, leaping up in order to avoid an explosion. Izuku wasted no time in sticking to the ceiling and starting up into a run, smiling as another imaginary box was checked off in his mind. Yes, the soles on the costume are perfect, not thick enough to neutralize my scapulae, and not thin enough to hurt my feet from running around. Feeling again a familiar tingling sensation, Izuku turned around expecting to see Bakugo flying at him for some sort of reckless attack. Instead, he was met with a blinding yellow flash coming his way. Crap. With the white eyes on his mask comically expanding in shock, Izuku leapt off the ceiling and onto the wall, stumbling a bit before continuing his run. Was that? Hey, my quirk, Kaminari exclaimed from his spot among his classmates. They were all currently watching the ongoing battle trial from the observation room, with only All Might having access to the contestants' audio. Wow, so I guess the rumors are true. That guy really can copy quirks, Away said, stating the obvious. It seemed as though UA was no different from any other high school as far as gossip went. How frightening. I wonder how that works, and if there's any limits to it, Yaoyorozu began, adding on to her classmates' observation. Either way, it's very unwise for Midoriya-san to be taking them both on alone. Nah, don't worry about that, Yaoyorozu. Midoriya can handle him. I mean, just look at him. He looks like a natural out there with those moves. Pretty awesome reflexes too, Kirishima added on with gusto. His similarly quirked classmate, on the other hand, had the opposite to say, speaking up right next to the red-haired boy. Are you kidding, Kirishima? TCH, you're way too easily impressed. Tetsu grumbled. If he couldn't shatter some crappy knockoff version of my quirk, then he's not getting any recognition from me. Oh, come on, Tetsu. Lighten up a little, Kirishima replied lightly. But when the steel quirk user only grunted and turned back to the screen with a grunt, Kirishima sighed and did the same, putting his mind back where it mattered and paying attention to the battle once again. After that, no one else had anything too major to say, just small oohs and ahs as Izuku continued to avoid blasts of electricity. The only person in the room who seemed to be watching the battle with contempt rather than interest was the tallest man in the room, All Might, who only stared down the giant monitor like it had personally offended him. Izuku jumped once more as another bolt of lightning whirred by his head. It seemed as though his spider sense wasn't in the mood to turn off at the moment, which was causing quite the annoyance in the back of his head. Geez, now I know why Peter said he gets headaches from this. It really makes it hard to focus. The super-powered teen thought to himself, as he jumped back onto the ceiling to avoid an angry Bakugo's explosion. This is how things had been going for the last 5 or so minutes. He would get out of range of his former friend's quirk, only to be forced back onto the ground in order to avoid Monoma's wild electricity. It was extremely obvious that the boy couldn't control the bolts of danger he was releasing downrange properly. But in this case, that fact was actually helping him more than hurting him. Grunting as he clung onto the ceiling again, Izuku did his best to try to use his brain, wincing as he felt something akin to TV static with all of the warnings he was getting. Well, so much for our plan to ambush Kakin. I wasn't expecting him to come after me together with Monoma-san. I hope Kendo-san adjusts to the situation before showing herself. Izuku's original idea had been to use himself as bait so he could goad Bakugo into the fight he wanted. Then, when she saw an opening, Izuku was supposed to come out and blindside him with a strong attack, hopefully knocking him out and ending it there. But now, those plans obviously weren't possible. Everything went straight down the drain as soon Bakugo brought back up. Now it was him who was being ambushed. Crap, now what do? I can't keep dodging forever, we'll run out of time. For a moment, The green-haired teen considered contacting his teammate through his radio with a small change of plan. If both of their enemies were down here fighting him, then she could probably sneak her way to the objective easily. However, Izuku quickly shook that idea off. Kendo specialized in fighting, and they had already agreed on that being the way they would win this. There was no going back now. Just as he was about to wrap his thoughts up, Izuku heard commotion begin behind him, and he simply couldn't resist slowing down and turning around to check it out. "Bakugo, hold up," Monoma called out suddenly, surprised when his teammate actually listened to him and halted his aggression. "What is it? Copy crap." Monoma didn't know what made him wince harder, the malice and fury behind Bakugo's words, or the not-so-nice nickname that the boy had chosen for him. Regardless, though, he said what he intended to say. "We've been chasing him for a while now, but his partner still hasn't shown up. Do you think she went straight for the objective?" Bakugo's red eyes pretty much tripled in size when he heard his teammate's words. It was obvious that this particular scenario hadn't even crossed his mind, but it was definitely very possible, especially when Izuku was involved. And speaking of the green-haired boy, he was perched curiously on the ceiling while his enemies had their little strategy meeting, a small smile growing on his face as an idea came to mind. "Hee, welp, you got us. Good job, Monoma-san. If my calculations are on point, Kendo-san should be securing the objective any second now." "TCH, no way. You're bluffing," Bakugo snarled. Izuku did his best not to smile as he fell into his act a little more. He really shouldn't be enjoying this, but messing with his former friend was too fun when there was no threat of eating an explosion. "I'm not bluffing, Kachin. Sorry to say it so soon, but it looks like I beat you again." This clearly only poured gasoline on the raging flame that the red-eyed teen was becoming, because soon he was glowering with rage. "Come on, Kendo-san, they think you're long gone, now's your chance," Izuku pleaded in his mind, hoping his partner would make her move soon. But he wasn't so lucky this time, because before long, Bakugo's rage poured over completely. "Copy crap, stand back. What? But what about the objective? We need to get rid of this shitty Deku as fast as possible, so stand the fuck back. I'm gonna annihilate this whole damn hallway." The slick-haired blonde quickly shut his mouth and obeyed, turning tail and running back a good distance right as Izuku's spider sense went into overdrive. "What the hell? Now it's almost as strong as when I stopped the robot foot." Luckily, or unluckily, the boy wasn't left in the dark about this new feeling for long, because as soon as he looked back up at his former friend, he saw that his arm was raised and aimed directly at him. And it didn't take genius to figure out that the pin the blonde was holding with his opposite hand was threatening a special kind of explosion. The super-powered teen was extremely quick to put all the pieces together, once again widening the white lenses on his costume when realization hit him. Those gauntlets must be filled with his sweat, and with all of it concentrated in one area, the explosion it creates is gonna be massive. Without wasting another second, Izuku sprung off the ceiling and began web-swinging away from his opponent as fast as his arms would carry him. If he didn't find an exit to this hallway fast, he was gonna be toast. Literally, the boy had just spotted an adjacent hallway and was rushing towards it when he heard a familiar voice cry out. Turning around momentarily to face the battle cry, Izuku smiled when he saw Kendo's athletic form jump around a corner and slam Monoma into a wall. He couldn't tell if the boy had hardened to defend himself, but he didn't care. All of his senses were currently flooded with the happiness of his teammate showing up to help him, until he realized a very important fact. She had only ambushed Monoma, and Bakugo was too far in front of her. She wouldn't get to him in time. Crap. Die. Shitty Deku. Boom. Itsuka turned around in a heartbeat at the ear-piercing explosion that rang through the hallway, and the only way she could describe it was a giant orange wave of destruction consuming everything in front of her. It was only after she shook off her initial shock that she realized her teammate had been completely enveloped in the enormous blast. "Midoriya," she yelled, spotting a sadistically grinning Bakugo and staring up towards him. She didn't get the chance to get very far though, because suddenly, a cold metal hand wrapped around her wrist, and it wasn't being gentle whatsoever. Kendo turned wide-eyed to see a shining Monoma with a nasty smirk on his face. She had seen him display his stolen quirks while she was waiting and watching, but she didn't think he could activate one in time to nullify her punches. "Where do you think you're going?" Gritting her teeth, Itsuka enlarged her other hand and delivered a precise karate chop to the top of the boy's head, or at least she would have if he hadn't let her go and jumped back. Now that they were back into a neutral standoff, Itsuka narrowed her eyes as the silver shine dissipated from her opponent's body. What was he up to? Why is he lowering his guard? And why didn't he shock me when he was holding my wrist? Can he only use one stolen quirk at a time? Falling back into a perfect fighting stance, the orange-haired teen allowed herself to smile with some new information on her side. With her new theory in mind, Kendo jumped up at the boy with quick feet, easily getting into her range of comfort. However, Monoma saw this coming and was ready with both a cocky smirk and a secret weapon. "Ah, trying to get in close, are you?" So predictable. He almost yawned as he dodged a quick jab from the girl. I can see the logic in your thinking. Not only is this the perfect range for you to fight in, but it almost puts my long-range lightning at a disadvantage, doesn't it? Izuku gritted her teeth as he dodged another one of her normal jabs, his carefree and sarcastic attitude only annoying her even further. What's wrong? Nothing to say. Well then, if you won't ask, I'll just show you why you've made a mistake. Bracing herself, Kendo took a defensive stance and got ready. She wasn't too sure how she was going to be able to avoid electricity, but she would try all the same. Suddenly though, instead of raising both arms like she had seen him do before, the slick-haired blonde only raised an open palm before jumping at her with a flash of familiar orange light. Boom, just like that. Before she could even comprehend what was happening, Kendo was eating an explosion and slamming back against the corridor wall. Monoma wasted no time in taking advantage of her broken stance, hardening up again into metal and pinning her in place forcefully. In all reality, this is where it should have ended for his orange-haired opponent. His capture tape was only a flick of his wrist away and this would all be over. But naturally, he at least needed to give her some parting words, right? It was only right after such an amazing victory. Kahaha, I bet you didn't expect that explosion, huh? You didn't think I would leave myself without close-range offense, did you? Kahaha. When the boy noticed that his opponent was beginning to recover and stir, he leisurely reached for the capture tape on his belt with a grin like no other. Finally, now I can go help Bakugo-sen pulverize Midoriya. This is gonna be so much fun. With the tape now in his hands, Monoma took one last smug glance at Izuku, expecting her sweet anger that would only fuel his own confidence. What he didn't expect to see, though, was a smirk that matched his own in size. What the hell are you? In the blink of an eye, Itsuka's hands enlarged to their full size, quickly enveloping the boy in front of her, squeezing hard. Ag, Monoma cried out as she squeezed his hardened body. Not so tough now, or yeah. Itsuka grinned, spitting some soot out onto the floor and lifting the boy higher. I'll admit it, you got me good with that third quirk trick, but it doesn't change your biggest weakness. You can't use your copied quirks simultaneously, can you? When the boy's eyes widened in total shock, Itsuka smiled wider and squeezed him again. Yep, I knew it. I was wondering why you turned off your metal body when you went to attack me, but now it makes perfect sense. It also makes what I'm about to do a lot more fun. All of a sudden, Itsuka narrowed her eyes and focused, gritting her teeth as she began squeezing with all of her strength. Gah! Monoma cried out in pain at the immense pressure surrounding his body. The metal was blocking a lot of the damage that would destroy his body, but it still hurt like hell. What's the matter? Just drop the metal and shock me. Oh wait, then getting squeezed wouldn't just hurt, would it? Kendo muttered out sarcastically. It seemed she was the one making the jokes now, and they were a lot funnier now too. Soon, small, but very visible cracks were beginning to appear all over Monoma's body, and judging by the way he was screaming, it didn't feel very pleasant. That was when Itsuka let up and held him normally, releasing most of the pressure, but still keeping him restrained in her hands. She wasn't completely cruel. After all, no matter how much Monoma deserved it in her eyes, she was about to open her mouth and tell him to surrender to save her the trouble of pulling out her capture tape. But suddenly, a very familiar and furious yell reached her ears, causing her to look towards Katsuki and Izuku for the first time. Izuku's eyes widened as the enormous explosion flew down the hallway towards him. He had been so caught up in seeing Kendo's surprise attack on Monoma that he'd completely abandoned his earlier plan of reaching the cover of a safer hallway. Shit! With the full power of one of Bakugo's gauntlets enveloping everything around him, Izuku dove the rest of the way towards the same adjacent hallway that he'd stopped short of, hissing in pain when he couldn't get away unscathed. Tumbling to the ground in the new passage, Izuku took a moment to assess both the situation and himself, immediately noticing that his costume was now completely ruined. Oh crap, it took me weeks to make this thing, he thought hastily, annoyed with both himself and his opponent as he inspected the threads more closely. He may as well have been shirtless now with the new adjustments Bakugo had made involuntarily, because as far as his upper body went, the only fabric left covering it was a tattered left sleeve and both of his web shooters. He also decided to do away with the mask and toss it aside, since both of the lenses were tattered as well, leaving just a green rag with eye holes. Wincing again, the green-haired teen also noticed the moderate to severe burns completely covering his right arm and parts of his chest, leaving the areas a sickly-looking red color. Hell, even the web shooter on his right hand was singed black, and he guessed it was only functional still on account of its extra protective size. Damn, that burned me more than I thought. Shaking off his pained thoughts, Izuku focused on the task at hand once again, now finally being able to see into the action-packed hallway as the smoke cleared. He had somewhat expected some sort of announcement from All Might now that half the building was totally trashed, but nothing came, only dead silence, forcing the super-powered teen to focus up and get ready again. creeping up the corner. He tried doing his best to listen for his former friend, trying to find any sort of indication of where he could be. Trying to get in close, are you? Izuku shuddered as the voice passed through his ears. That was unmistakably Monoma, and by the sound of it, it looked like he and Kendo were engaged in battle. I have to help her, Izuku muttered to himself, cautiously turning the corner and looking towards the pair in the hallway. He spotted them both quickly. They were squared up and definitely ready to begin fighting, just as he expected. What he didn't expect, however, was for them to be the only two people in the destroyed hallway. With perfect timing, Izuku's spider sense blared in his head with impeccable precision. Worry about yourself, Deku. Bakugo snarled from behind him, pressing his palms into the boy's back and sending twin explosions into him. Izuku winced again and he jumped away as fast as he could. But once again, it wasn't fast enough to get away completely unharmed, and he could already feel more burns flaring up on his backside. What's the matter, Deku? You were so confident a few days ago. So fight back. Stop running and fight me. Facing his former friend with fire in his eyes, Izuku prepared himself, not surprised in the slightest when Bakugo instantly made a move for him. Die, the blonde screamed again, lunging at the super-powered teen with a signature open palm. Izuku read it perfectly though, quickly sidestepping and grabbing the boy's gauntlet right before his hand could reach his face. Ironically, this was the same exact position they had found themselves in back at their little scuffle in front of Aldera. This time, however, Bakugo wasn't going to give up so easily, rapidly mimicking the attack with the opposite arm when he failed to escape his opponent's grip. This didn't seem to faze Izuku at all, taking his former friend's actions in stride and swiftly catching his other wrist. Stop this, Kaken. You're not stronger than me. There was some unknown dread behind his words, which he still couldn't shake off for some reason. As far as Bakugo went though, there was definitely no such remorse. Pure and raw aggravation would better describe the kind of energy he was giving off, some low growls even escaping his gritted teeth as he leered distastefully at the boy in front of him. After a while of staring down Bakugo, Izuku came to the conclusion that the boy wasn't gonna back down from the standoff. He was gonna have to make a move if he wanted this to end, because there was no way he was gonna get overpowered. The green-haired teen was just about to push back against his former friend when his spider sense began ringing suddenly. Looking around at his current situation, Izuku couldn't tell where the danger was. He had both of Bakugo's arms secured firmly, so what could he do? When the blaring in his head didn't let up after a moment, Izuku adjusted his view downwards, figuring the incoming attack had to be coming from the blonde's legs since his hands were useless. Unfortunately, this whole thought process by the super-powered teen was some very severe oversight. Die, Bakugo screeched out, curling his fingers in and then out again, successfully sending out a slightly more ranged explosion. And wouldn't you know it, that small bit of range gained was just enough to nick a green-clad hero course student straight in the face. Gah, Izuku shouted bitterly, rubbing his eyes as his vision blurred. He knew that Bakugo wasn't limited to only close-range damage, but he figured that holding back his entire arm would hinder his ability to toss his sweat around. Taking advantage of his enemy stumbling backwards, Bakugo jumped forward with another hand raised offensively. Now was his chance to do some damage. Meanwhile, Izuku was having a full sensory overload, and it wasn't pleasant. Not only was his spider sense piercing his already aching head, but now his vision was blurry and his ears were ringing. So as far as mental suffering went, things couldn't get much worse, which was why he felt his body move all on its own, as if acting in a final act of self-defense. Right as Bakugo was coming down on him, he swiftly pushed the dangerous open palm out of the way and grabbed his opponent by the collar of his shirt. With a look of absolute focus in his eyes, Izuku pulled back his free hand and prepared to deliver a blow at full strength to end this right here and there. His clenched fist and singed eyes looked almost angry as he prepared to release years of pent-up rage with one single punch. But right in the crucial moment when he was about to throw it, his state of blur and emptiness faded, bringing him back with an enormous amount of realization. Bakugo seemed to notice this too, because once the green-haired teen began to slowly lower his arm, he snarled once again and kicked out of his grip, propelling himself backwards by sending a pair of explosions right into Izuku's chest. Now back into a state of neutral, Bakugo watched as Izuku fell to the floor almost lifelessly, which would have normally made him happy, but this was clearly not what it looked like. He didn't look defeated at all. No, he simply looked lost in thought, as if this were some mere game that could be paused at any moment, which only made the blonde's blood boil even more. GRR, damn it, Deku. What the hell are you doing? Why aren't you fighting? Are you really this fucking pathetic? Come on, we have a score to settle, damn it. But that's the thing, Kaken. We don't. Inside Izuku's mind, he couldn't stop thinking about what had just occurred and what it meant. I almost killed Kaken. If I hadn't regained myself and stopped that punch, he would be gone, just like that. Was that just self-preservation? Or does my heart actually still have a grudge against Kaken? I thought I already worked this out. I'm moving past it. After another few seconds of mulling everything over, Izuku looked up again and couldn't hold back an audible gulp from leaving his lips. There was Bakugo, right at the end of the hall, holding the pin of his other gauntlet. And it didn't take a detective to figure out he was aiming right at the super-powered teen. Shit, alright, Deku, you don't want to fight. I'll just end this right here. Kaken, stop. You almost blew up the whole building with that last time. Izuku sputtered out as he looked around rapidly, trying to find anything that could help his situation. Sadly though, there didn't seem to be a close escape route this time. His little scuffle with Bakugo moved them around more than he anticipated, leaving the adjacent hallway he was in earlier far behind him now. Abruptly though, the green-haired teen had a thought occur to him about the direction they went during their battle. If they went away from the hallway he had hidden last time, then that meant they had to be closer to Kendo-san. Izuku thought joyously as he spotted her a few meters behind Bakugo. She seemed to be looking their way, no doubt because of Bakugo's extreme volume when declaring his next move moments ago. Another thing that the green-haired teen noticed was the very unresponsive Monoma clutched in her enlarged hands, causing him to breathe a sigh of relief for his friend's situation, as well as get his mind churning with ideas. He had to think fast though, because it was becoming very obvious that Bakugo was seconds away from pulling the pin and making his move. The only thing that appeared to be holding him back was the possibility of getting a response out of Izuku. I can't run from it. It's too big of a blast, and cover is even further away than it was last time. Doing his best to come up with rapid-fire ideas, Izuku shot down one after the other, trying all he could to not show his frustration externally. I could fire a web ball at his eyes. Peter does it all the time and it works wonders. No, that won't work. Even if his eyes were covered, his blast would still be effective. He doesn't exactly need to be precise with a giant explosion. HMPH. Fine, stay silent you shitty Deku. You won't dodge this one, Bakugo screamed before gripping the pin on his gauntlet once again, closing his eyes in anticipation. Izuku awaited the horrendously loud alarm bell that would be ringing in his head any second now. He was out of options. He needed to do something, but what? The boy was about to cut his losses and just start sprinting in the opposite direction, already cringing at how painful the explosion would feel in his ears. Clang, stopping in his tracks at the unexpected noise. Izuku slowly turned his body to look at his former friend, happy that his spider sense still wasn't going off, but also confused by its silence at the same time. As soon as he laid eyes on Bakugo, however, all of the confusion was cleared up. Oh, what the hell? Bakugo complained, rubbing the back of his head with both hands where the very hard projectile hit him. This was all well and good, except said projectile wasn't just hard, it was metal. And in fact, it wasn't even a projectile, it was a human being. Nido Monoma to be exact. Are you stupid or something? If you use that damn attack again, this whole building is gonna come down. Itsuka scolded, only appearing to make the raging blonde even more annoyed. Oh, shut the hell up and wait your turn, man hands. Izuku couldn't really describe what he was feeling right now. Relief, worry, pride. Itsuka had just totally saved his butt again. And there she was going head to head with Bakugo like he was just some other person. It was impressive. Another thing the boy noticed while the two argued was something very, very familiar about the way Bakugo's gauntlet looked from this angle. He was turned around, but not completely, showing a full side view of his big green support items. And from this particular perspective, they looked a lot slimmer than usual. Almost like, shocker, Izuku instantly energized himself and urged his pain away. He couldn't remember the exact issue he had seen this in, but he vividly recalled Peter exploiting a very obvious weakness in Shocker's gauntlets, their own power. Let's hope I have the aim for this, Kendo-san. The green-haired teen shouted out, getting both her and Bakugo's attention. Take cover. Oh no you don't, Katsuki snarled, taking aim onto Izuku again and gripping the pin on his support item. What, don't you want to fight him together? Kendo urged back, confused by his uncharacteristic behavior. Why would he defy logic like this? Just trust me, Izuku smiled, jumping to the ceiling and running in the opposite direction of both of them. Come on Kaken, aren't you gonna blow me away? Instantly Itsuka knew he was baiting him, and it made her smile as she examined the situation with new realization. Of course he has a plan. For a second, I thought he was just trying to show off or something. Happy at the new turn of events, Itsuka turned and ran away as well. The last thing she saw before she turned a corner was the back of Bakugo as he cried out while releasing his attack. Die. Right as he heard this, Izuku turned and unstuck his feet from the ceiling, making sure he was falling right as Bakugo pulled the pin on his gauntlet. From here he had a perfect shot of his target, and even though he was upside down in midair, he would have to make do. Otherwise, he'd better get used to calling himself Ashman. The very moment Bakugo heard the satisfying click that came with the removal of his gauntlet's pin, a similar satisfying noise could be heard coming from his opponent's wrist as well, signaling the launching of a singular web ball. And in the small 1-second delay that Bakugo's gauntlet took to release all of his concentrated sweat, One small gooey sphere of web fluid hit its mark perfectly, coating the green support item's front side entirely, widening his eyes. Bakugo couldn't even let out an entire sentence before everything went white. Oh phoo. Boom. Swinging as fast as he could through random hallways, Izuku looked around for any signs of his partner. They needed to regroup. And while his little shocker trick had worked perfectly as far as stopping the blast from going outwards, he knew Bakugo wouldn't be defeated that easily, not by a long shot. That explosion was massive, and instead of going forward where he aimed it, it all imploded on him. All that worked for though was getting away. I know for a fact that Kaken's skin is resistant to explosion. His mind was running a mile a minute right now, and he couldn't seem to slow it down. At the very least, his actions seemed to have saved the building from being completely ripped apart. He had no doubt that what Kendo had told Bakugo would have absolutely happened if his blast was fired off at full power. And speaking of Kendo, he just about jumped out of his skin when he turned a corner and almost crashed straight into her. Kendo-san, there you are, Izuku exclaimed breathlessly, starting to feel a bit of exhaustion creep in. Midoriya, that was epic. I'm glad you got out of there in time, she said with a large grin, not noticing the burns covering his body until she got closer. Oh wow, are you gonna be alright? She asked as she reached out to touch his shoulder before deciding against it. It would probably hurt more than help him. Wincing one more time, Izuku nodded, putting his game face back on since the battle wasn't over yet. I'm fine, thanks for worrying Kendo-san. And thanks especially for distracting him at the last second. I wouldn't have gotten that idea without a few more seconds of concentration. Ha, it's no big deal. I just threw the closest thing to me, haha. Itsuka muttered sheepishly, scratching the back of her head in embarrassment. Well thanks anyways, but now we still have to figure out how to beat Kaken. This caught the orange-haired teen's attention, shooting him a small puzzled look. You think he's still up? After a huge explosion like that backfired right in his face. Izuku nodded. Yeah, Kaken's quirk doesn't just allow him to create explosive sweat, it also makes his skin heavily resist his explosion. Otherwise, he would hurt himself really often with how destructive he is. After hearing the detailed explanation, it dawned on Itsuka again that Izuku grew up with Bakugo, so he most likely knew everything about him, as well as the best way to approach the situation considering his active mind. Alright then, go over everything you know about him and let's make another plan. My quirk is completely at your disposal, Midoriya, Itsuka said encouragingly with a small wink. Surely this would be easier than their first plan since it was 2 against 1 now. Alright, Izuku stammered. He was still new to positive encounters from other people his age. He briefly wondered if he had built enough trust with Kendo to earn her as a friend, but he quickly discarded that thought. He didn't even know what having a real friend even felt like. Plus, there were bigger things going on right now. Okay, I've got an idea on how to take advantage of his grudge with me. But you're gonna have to do most of the heavy lifting, is that okay? Not hesitating for a moment, Itsuka smirked. Lay it on me. Bakugo couldn't grow more furious if he tried, and it didn't help soothe his anger when he heard his teammate groan in unconsciousness from the floor once the smoke cleared. And now, the topping on the cake, the very best part, was that Deku was gone. This was gonna drive him insane. The only redeeming thought that kept him from snapping was the solid fact that he would absolutely run into Deku before the exercise was up. His team was on offense, so they would have to come back and finish him off if they wanted to win. That was certain. There had to only be a few minutes left in the battle trial. It only dawned on the spiky-haired blonde a few moments later that Izuku and his partner had a very easy and very accessible alternative to winning this thing. Shit, the bomb, Katsuki remembered as he turned around to begin sprinting, only to be stopped by an array of web balls. After nearly getting hit with one, Bakugo dodged the others relatively easily, though he had a feeling that they were never truly trying to hit him. TCH, so you decided to come back, Deku. And you brought man hands with you too, Bakugo growled, bending his knees a bit and getting into a defensive stance. He wouldn't be caught flat-footed this time. He was ready for any kind of teamwork bullshit they would come up with. Sorry to keep you waiting, Kaken. Don't worry though, I'm finally ready to kick your ass, Izuku said somewhat darkly, getting a wide-eyed response from not just Bakugo, but from his teammate as well. Oh, and don't worry about Kendo-san, she's just here to watch. I'm gonna do this alone, and I'm gonna enjoy every second of it. Bakugo growled again as he processed what he was hearing. What had gotten into Deku? He sounded almost sadistic. Midoriya, what are you doing? This wasn't part of the plan, Kendo reminded him, trying and failing to not lose her cool. I don't care about the plan anymore, Kendo-san. All I want right now is to get my revenge on this scumbag. So make yourself useful and just throw me at him as hard as you can. I'll handle the rest. Hell yeah, Deku. Now you're speaking my language. Bring it on, Bakugo cried out passionately, taking off into a sprint with his right palm charged up. Kendo looked unsure about the situation, but nevertheless did as Izuku instructed and grew her right hand, picking him up quickly before throwing him as hard as she could towards their opponent. Izuku once again gained a twisted smile on his lips as he soared through the air, bringing back his own right arm to prepare for a collision with Bakugo's. This was it, the moment of truth, and Izuku could almost foresee the moment of impact, picturing his fist absolutely blowing his opponents away with ease. And it is indeed what could have happened, had this all not been a ruse. I'm sorry, Kaken, but I'm not ready to face you yet. I could seriously hurt you if my pent-up anger were to get the best of me, and that's the last thing I want. I hope I can control my emotions enough to be able to fight you for real one day. Please forgive me. Right as the two were about to collide with all their strength, Izuku maneuvered mid-flight and avoided the blonde teen completely, flying right past him and firing 2 web lines back at him. Before he even had the chance to turn around, Bakugo felt his arms being bound by a familiar sticky substance. Izuku landed once the tension on his webs held up and stopped his flight. He wasted no time in planting his feet firmly and pulling back on his webs, successfully holding his former friend back by the 2 web lines connected to his hands. Not being able to turn around in his current position, Bakugo attempted to struggle out of his restraints. But it was no use, he was no match for Izuku's raw strength. His only option now was to try and burn the webs off his hands. But he didn't even get the chance. Kendo-san. Now, Izuku cried out, sounding urgent despite not struggling holding onto the blonde teen whatsoever. Widening his eyes, Bakugo snapped his head forward, his head churning with realization as everything began making sense. Fucking Deku. This was a part of his plan. Fuck. No wonder he was so aggressive. Bakugo was forced to end his raging thoughts there, because before he knew it, a big fist was coming right for his helpless body, and the smirk on the attacker's face made it obvious this would be a finishing blow. Sprinting up to Bakugo with fire in her eyes, Itsuka charged up her enlarged fist and let it rip, making sure to hold back enough to not seriously injure the blonde boy. If it were up to her, she would have punched him straight to hell along with Monoma, but Izuku had specifically told her to hold back for his former friend's sake when they had discussed this elaborate acting plan. Nevertheless, even with half of her power, Bakugo dropped like a sack of potatoes, a huge fist enveloping his whole body and shooting him back a few meters before falling lifeless to the floor. Seeing that his plan was a total success, Izuku ran up to his former friend and inspected his unmoving body, Kendo joining him shortly after. We did it, Midoriya. He took the bait just like you said. Kendo cheered when she got to him. It took all of her energy just to stop herself from pulling him into a hug. He seemed to be in a rather serious mood, so she held back and instead opted for staring down at Bakugo along with him. Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you, Kendo-san. I'm grateful for your help. Smiling genuinely, Kendo nodded at his response. She was about to open her mouth and tell the boy that it was his plan that won the fight for them, but fate had other plans, because soon, the angry blonde on the floor began twitching. Ugh. Bakugo grumbled from his supine position on the cold ground. It seemed as though Kendo had held back a tad too much on her finishing blow. Izuku, however, saw this coming, instantly webbing the blonde-haired teen to the floor and reaching for his capture tape. However, before the super-powered teen could secure the bindings onto him, said blonde had some final choice words for him. Fucking Deku. Bakugo groaned painfully, briefly struggling against the restraints before giving up and falling back down. I bet you thought that was pretty clever, he continued in a weak voice. Just you wait, laugh it up while you can, because I won't stop, Deku. I bet you've laughed at me every day for all these years, hiding your quirk, knowing that you were always stronger than me. Well, enjoy it, because I won't stop until I stomp you like the little shit you are. Izuku was frozen in place, squeezing the capture tape in his hand as hard as he could. Is that really what he thinks? Kakanai. The boy began before stopping completely. There's no point. He won't listen to reason right now. And even if he did, what would I say? Knowing there was nothing he could say to fix things right now, Izuku just whispered out one last line to himself before crouching down and securing him with the capture tape. I'm sorry things got so messed up between us. There it is. Izuku Midoriya and Itsuka Kendo are the winners. A powerful voice echoed through the loudspeakers. Whoa, that was awesome. Kirishima shouted out to the class as he watched the conclusion of the first battle test. Midoriya and Kendo kicked some serious ass. Totally manly. Who cares about that? Did you guys see Midoriya without a shirt? Hagakure gushed out, gaining nods from a few other girls in the class as well. They were all right, I guess. Midoriya is a bit unoriginal though. Zero mumbled to no one in particular. As more words were exchanged about the epic battle that had just taken place in front of them, it was quite obvious that most gossip was about the green-haired teen and his special set of abilities. But that didn't mean that his partner went unnoticed either. Tetsutatsu couldn't seem to get rid of the blank stare on his face, still focused on the screen in front of him. The metal user replayed what he had just seen in his mind over and over again. Not only had that girl shattered through his quirk with nothing but her bare hands, but she also knew how to throw one hell of a punch, as weird as it was to tell himself. There was something that really appealed to him about some rather manly traits that the girl had demonstrated. One thing was for sure, he needed to talk to her when he got the chance. The class went by relatively quickly after that, with most battles not taking anywhere near as long as Izuku and Itsuka's. Although one thing they did have to endure though, was an extra aggressive All Might when he and the class pointed out all of their mistakes. Luckily though, the teacher couldn't focus on the negatives for very long, because many classmates were quick to point out just how well the two had performed together. And of course, Izuku was the first to shrug off all the compliments and give the credit to his partner, who he claimed did most of the heavy lifting. Kendo obviously denied this, saying that he was the one who came up with both plans that allowed her to take down both of their opponents. Either way though, everyone was well beyond exhausted now. The school day was over, and a warm, gentle sunset had made its way comfortably onto the horizon. All was peaceful in the world at UA. In fact, most students had already gone home hours ago. Only one particular attendee was without peace as he slowly walked out of the enormous building. His name was Izuku Midoriya, and he was nervous as hell right now. See, now that the stress of the battle trial had passed, a certain set of words that escaped his lips in the presence of someone very particular were crossing his mind again, and it was really eating him up. He knew Kendo would want answers on what he had let slip earlier, so to put it simply, he had waited back in the support department after school and waited for her to go home without him. She would have no doubt waited for him and confronted him, but now that a few hours had passed, Izuku felt a little more at ease as he walked out of the school building, which seemed to be a major miscalculation on his part. HMPH, so much for your promise earlier. I guess you were avoiding me. Izuku felt a jolt go up his spine at the familiar voice coming from his right, pausing for a moment before turning in her direction shamefully. And shame wasn't the only thing he was feeling either. Severe regret and sadness also panged in his heart when he saw that her face displayed a look of actual hurt. Kendo-san, why didn't you tell me that you had met me already? Did I read things wrong or something? Did you not want to be friends? She asked with a face that multiplied his guilt tenfold. Izuku could feel it in his heart that a moment of truth was coming up. In front of him was an opportunity that he had to take if he didn't want to lose his first potential friend in a long time. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad. Why would she want to be friends with me anyways? There's way cooler guys in our class. Why doesn't she hang out with them? Stop that brain. I'm confident now. I know who I am, and I want to be happy. She's the one who helped me become this way. I can do this. If I can defeat Kaken, then I can do anything. Taking a deep breath before looking the orange-haired teen in her teal eyes, Izuku grew a look of determination and prepared himself. Kendo-san, I'm sorry I hid who I was from you. I owe you an apology as well as an explanation for my actions, Izuku said sincerely and confidently, bowing his head to her and waiting for acknowledgement. Itsuka, however, was taken aback by the level of severity and formality the boy was taking with this. Nonetheless, though, she nodded for him to continue. Taking another deep breath, Izuku began anew. In truth, Kendo-san, I'm not the same person I was when I first met you almost a year ago. See, due to some unusual circumstances, my quirk didn't manifest until last year. Or to be more specific, 2 days before I met you in front of that dojo. Widening her eyes, Kendo tried to hold back and let him finish, but her curiosity got the best of her, forcing her to at least ask one question. Oh my goodness, are you serious? Is that why Bakugo was telling the class you were quirkless all week? Izuku nodded solemnly, never breaking eye contact. Yes, like I said, my relationship with Kaken is complicated. And after today, it's gonna be even worse. As you saw today, he thinks I've been hiding my quirk from him all of our lives. So now he's even more spiteful. Wait, so you don't actually hate him? You still want to salvage your friendship with him? Why? Why not just kick his ass and get it over with? He's a bully. I understand that, Kendo-san, but I've learned over the past year from someone special I have to be responsible with this power that I've been given. I went most of my life thinking I was quirkless and wishing I could be the best hero in the world. And my morals won't allow me to misuse this gift I've been given. I know it sounds weird, and I can't elaborate too much, but I've seen wisdom in the form of someone else, and I've learned so much from them. So while I may not forgive Kaken for the way he treated me for years, I refuse to hate him. He deserves to know all of this stuff too, but I still haven't worked out how to tell him yet. I doubt I'll ever get the chance now. Wow, that's surprisingly mature, Midoriya. I'm impressed, she complimented, bringing out her genuine smile for all the world to see again. And I guess that explains why he was even able to bully you in the first place. I thought you had your quirk the whole time, so it didn't make sense to me. Yeah, exactly. And on the topic of my quirk, how I got the confidence to use it was all thanks to you, Kendo-san. This again took the orange-haired teen by surprise. What are you talking about? Izuku chuckled a bit before explaining. It's true, I don't know if you remember, but back when we first met and you told me to join that martial arts dojo, I had never really spoken to a girl before. Izuku waited for her to get her chuckles out of the way before continuing. Anyways, I was a stuttering mess around you, and I was so nervous that I ran away. It was a confusing time for me. Like I told you, I had just gotten my quirk 2 days before that, and I didn't really know what to do. I wanted to use it to become a hero obviously, but I didn't have the confidence at all. Everyone around me was doubting me. Hell, even my mom was doubting me. I had no one to believe in me, so I guess I just got lost in all of that negativity. It wasn't until I decided to go back and apologize to you for running off that everything changed. I saw that you were talking to that UA student you were with and jumped up onto a building to listen. I know it's messed up and an invasion of privacy, but I'm so glad I did it, because everything you told that guy was everything I needed to desperately hear. Widening her eyes more and more as he went on, Itsuka recalled the exact conversation that she had with Tamaki that day. It was still very fresh on her mind. And while the blue-haired third year hasn't changed much since that little talk, she was glad to know that it at least had its intended effect on someone. So yeah, after I heard you say that stuff to him, it sunk deep into my soul. And ever since then, I've had a much better support system, and I actually believe in myself more and more now. It was just like you said, I needed to be there for myself, because that's who I would always be with at the end of the day. Or at least, that's how I interpreted it. This was so much for Kendo to take in. Had he really been holding all of this back from everyone? She was about to open her mouth to at least say something. But Izuku was dead set on closing his statement first. And so that's it. After that I started to train myself with my powers, and it's all thanks to you. I eventually intended to go back to that dojo to find you so I could apologize and thank you. But I guess I was still too shy. And when I found you again at the entrance exam and you didn't remember me, I took it as the perfect opportunity to get a fresh start without you thinking I was a loser. Again, I'm truly sorry for deceiving you, Kendo-san. I hope that despite what I did, you can forgive me and we can be friends. After a few moments of silence, Itsuka smiled genuinely once again, seemingly growing tired of looking at the top of Izuku's head. You're such an idiot, Midoriya. The superpowered teen sputtered out, raising his head to meet her eyes once more. Though I guess that does explain why your fighting style looks so crappy and all over the place. Looks like we'll have to fix that, won't we? Izuku didn't dare say a word. He was too confused. So, she's not mad at me. But seriously, I'd love to be your friend. Thank you for clearing that up for me. I'm not mad. I actually think it's really sweet that you got so much out just a few words from me. But just know now that you aren't alone anymore. I'm here and I believe in you. She stated slowly and genuinely, loving the way he was holding on to every word. With a few more seconds of silence, Itsuka put out her hand out like she had so many months before. Only this time she wasn't just offering a friendly greeting. No, this time she was offering something that the green-haired teen in question had only felt once before in his life. Friendship. With a heavy amount of tears falling down his face, Izuku took the hand eagerly. She believes. Wait, are you serious? That sounds so dangerous. Kendo screeched out to Izuku in the middle of his story. She was dangerously close to bursting out into laughter, but she held back with a hand in her mouth as they continued their walk to school. Yep, it's true. And it worked wonders too, Izuku said somewhat smugly, placing his hands behind his head and looking up to see the approaching UA building. I mean, I guess so, but still, that's totally stupid. Paying random kids to throw rocks at you was the best you could come up with to practice dodging. Yeah. Believe me, once you eat a few rock sandwiches, you'll be dodging everything. It's a good motivator. At that, Itsuka couldn't hold back anymore and let the floodgates out, laughing vigorously at the boy's sarcastic comment. Sorry, it's just that the way you say this crap is just so. She trailed off, laughter taking a hold of her again. Izuku smiled at her genuinely, not bothered at all by her laughter. In fact, he actually enjoyed it. Seeing her like this and knowing that he was getting better at his copid sense of humor was actually pretty satisfying to him. Peter, you're the best. It was just yesterday when he and Kendo had their big talk after school, and things were already proving to go beyond smoothly. He wasn't so sure about any other girls, but Itsuka so far had been extremely easy to talk to, and even more so now that he could officially call her his friend. All in all, the boy was extremely pleased with the state they were in right now, and he couldn't help but continue his witty sarcasm all the way up until they walked into class together. He even had to nudge her with his elbow when they arrived just to calm down her giggles, because they appeared to be a bit late considering Aizawa-sensei was already at the front of the classroom. There you two are, that's everyone, the man said in his signature even tone. Izuku and Itsuka slowly stepped into the room and looked around uneasily, not knowing whether to bow and apologize for being late or just waiting for further instruction. Luckily, Their instructor took initiative and answered their mental questions for them. You guys aren't late. I'm just here early for a quick announcement. Today's homeroom will be a bit different. Both teens went wide-eyed for a moment before sighing in relief. However, before they could even make a move for their seats, Aizawa-sensei surprisingly began his so-called announcement right away. I'll make this quick so I can get out of your hair. Good job on the battle trial yesterday. You all took the big reveal in stride and performed quite well for the most part. I'll be going over the footage myself later to see what we need to work on. But for now, you all did well. Before anyone could get excited about the praise, the bandage-wearing man quickly started back up. Don't get a big head though. I also heard some rather violent rumors about one match in particular, Aizawa said in a much more serious tone, eyeing Katsuki and Midoriya readily. Seems you two got pretty passionate, huh? Bakugo seemed like he couldn't care less about the situation right now, only grunting and looking away from the baggy-eyed man. But when the instructor's hard, pork-erasing gaze shifted to Izuku, the teen looked much more uneasy. Aizawa watched the boy gulp as he looked him up and down. There was still a very obvious patch of red skin on his cheek, so the rumors are true. That match did take things too far. Damn it, All Might, what were you thinking? If I find out this has anything to do with that crazy theory. After a pregnant pause, Izuku was just about ready to bow repeatedly in apology, but once again, his sensei was too quick to speak. Regardless, you all did your best, and I can't ask any more from that, especially since you're all okay. A heavy sigh could almost be heard across the room as the tension fizzled out. But now, as for the reason I'm here early, Aizawa said before clearing his throat, easily capturing the class's attention once more. Today I will be leaving you all alone so you can decide on class representatives. The eraser hero could obviously tell that the class was speechless by his unexpected reveal, so he simply took this opportunity to give his final parting words. I don't really care what you guys do to decide, just try to get it done by the end of the day. I'll need a main representative and a vice representative. That is all. With that, the bored-looking man made straight for the door, only pausing his walk when he was right beside Midoriya and Kendo. That burn looks pretty serious, Midoriya. He half-whispered to the boy. You should go and let Recovery Girl have a look. All right, Aizawa-sensei. Thank you, Izuku stuttered out, bowing immediately, not moving an inch until he felt his teacher walk by. Itsuka, on the other hand, watched the scene with both amusement and mild worry. She had also suggested he go and see the healing quirk nurse yesterday after their big fight had ended, but he simply shrugged it off then too. Of course, she now knew the reason, being in on some more private information. He had taken the time to explain this odd decision to her yesterday as well. These injuries are the first ones I've gotten that are actually somewhat serious. I want to see how my healing factor reacts to them. I'm sure it has a limit, and I want to get a good idea of where it is sooner rather than later. Did she like him using his body like a ragdoll in search of scientific analysis? No, but he did have a point, and now that he had gone through with it, she was actually rather impressed at how much he ended up healing overnight. She hadn't seen under his shirt, of course, but the red marking on his face looked like a mere fraction of what it was yesterday. Maybe he made the right call after all. Itsuka would have loved to continue bouncing these ideas around in her mind some more, but now that Aizawa-sensei was gone, the entire class had erupted into pandemonium over the new available positions, easily sweeping away her deep train of thought. I would make an amazing class representative. Monoma sounded out with a bit more cockiness than he intended. Like hell, I want it. It would fit me perfectly. Away spit back, standing up as well. Pardon me, but I have to disagree with both of you. I believe I'm the one best suited for this position of responsibility. Yaoyorozu spoke up, throwing her own hat into the ring in the process. It wasn't long after this that everyone else who wanted the job began standing up to make their voices heard, some much louder than others. Ooh, Kendo-san, should we do something about TH? Everyone shut up. The orange-haired teen roared, taking charge and getting everyone's attention. Well, that's one way to do it. I was gonna suggest something a bit more subtle, but this works too. Izuku thought sheepishly before he heard his friend talk again. Geez, you guys don't have to scream for this kind of thing. Why don't we all just vote or something? If we get this done quickly, we can just relax the rest of class, Itsuka grumbled out, walking back to her seat and sitting down. After another small moment of silence, one person spoke up to rebuke the big fist user's idea, and he wasn't trying to be polite about it at all. That's so dumb. Everyone is just gonna vote for themselves, Monoma yelled, instantly getting the girl's attention again. Itsuka didn't know why or how, but the tone in the slick-haired blonde's voice always irked her in the worst way possible, and she hated it. It was like the opposite effect of what Izuku's voice had on her. It just always managed to piss her off, and now was no exception, because as soon as the words crossed her ears, a forehead vein made its presence known and she jumped up out of her seat and gave him a hearty leer. How about instead of complaining like a little girl, you just shut up and try it? Or is that too hard for you? If you want, I could knock you out like I did yesterday and we could vote without you. That's always an option. Monoma couldn't help but let out a large gulp as a prolonged "ua" was heard around the classroom. He tried his best to come up with some sort of comeback, but one of his fellow classmates began speaking first. "Well, I like the idea. Anyone else?" Kirishima said with his easygoing smile, looking around the classroom for his answer. "I love it. It makes everything nice and fair," Ashido agreed. "Heck yeah. I already know who I'm voting for too," Tetsu proclaimed. "Who cares what we do? Let's just get this over with," Kaibara said nonchalantly, kicking his feet up on his desk. With that, everyone got to work on voting with little slips of paper and collecting them. And at the end of all the counting, one could say that the winner took it all by an absolute landslide. "Oh wow," Hagakure breathed as she finished counting up all the votes in the box. She and Ashido had volunteered to collect and count them all in order to present the results. But now she wasn't sure if she could gather herself in time to speak. Toru-chan, what's wrong?" Ashido asked awkwardly, seeing that the whole class was staring up at them waiting for the results. Oh, sorry. The winner just got way more votes than everyone else. So, with a total tally of 5 votes, the winner of the class representative, Kendo-chan. "What? Me?" Kendo asked oddly, standing up from her seat. Monoma yelled incredulously at the exact same time. Sparing a moment to glare at Monoma, Kendo focused back towards the front of the class, voicing the biggest question in her head at the moment. "How did I get 5 votes? I didn't even vote for myself," she finished, shooting a hidden glance at her new green-haired friend. Tetsu, whose seat was right next to hers, was about to open his mouth to express his confidence in her, but his similarly quirked classmate beat him to it. "Are you kidding?" Kirishima began with a chuckle. "I'm surprised you didn't get more votes, Kendo. You're awesome." Turning to him in confusion, Izuku craned her neck. What did I do? I've barely spoken to half of you." Once again, before Tetsu could answer the girl's question with reassurance, he was beaten to the punch by the usually quiet Kaibara. "Who cares about that crap? The fact that you could shut that cocky dumbass up was good enough for me." Kendo turned to the brooding boy with somewhat widened eyes. She never thought of it like that, but it made sense. Monoma probably wasn't the most liked guy in the class because of his attitude. And while what she did to keep him at bay moments ago felt normal to her, it probably felt like a big deal to everyone else. Hell, she wouldn't be surprised if those actions won her the election on their own. "Hey, what do you mean cocky?" Monoma glared at the spiky-haired boy. Everyone ignored him though as Hagakure spoke up once more. "Oh wow, it gets even weirder. We have a tie for second place. Both Midoriya and Yaoyorozu got 2 votes, meaning we need some sort of tiebreaker for second place." While Yaoyorozu looked somewhat deflated that she didn't get more votes, Izuku appeared completely terrified. What? 2 votes? Why would anyone vote for me?" "Good one, Midoriya. You and Kendo sure are funny sometimes," Kirishima joked again. "Wait, that makes perfect sense, Midoriya." Kendo looked towards him. "I voted for you, so then with yours that makes 2, why is that a surprise?" You voted for me, Kendo-san." "I voted for you." "Oh." Izuku tensed out awkwardly, not knowing whether or not to be flattered or confused by the situation. Across the room, a particular amphibian-quirked girl looked on at the situation. She didn't regret her vote. Not one bit. There was always something oddly familiar that came with watching Izuku move around and talk. She couldn't pinpoint what it was exactly, but she was definitely intrigued. "Well, I guess we have to come up with something then. How about rock, paper, scissors?" Ashido suggested with a shrug. "Nah, that's lame. They should fight or something." "Now that would be cool." Wei spoke up. "Don't be foolish. How are we supposed to fight in a classroom?" Yaoyorozu argued, clearly looking more than a little nervous at going head-to-head with the green-haired boy. Meanwhile, Bakugo was doing his best to not blow a gasket at the commotion around him, muttering hushed swears under his breath from only getting 1 vote. Finally though, after what seemed like far too much bickering, Itsuka stood up to take charge, only to be stopped by the hard gaze of her spider-quirked friend. Nodding to her, Izuku stood up and approached Yaoyorozu, the class going silent almost immediately. What kind of challenge had he decided on? "Why, Yaoyorozu-san," Izuku stuttered out, clearly still not comfortable talking to the opposite gender. And it wasn't much better on the other end, the female in question not meeting his eyes and looking unsure of herself in every way possible. I would like to concede the position," Izuku finally blurted out. "What?" Pretty much the entire class yelled. Forgive me. Did I just hear you right?" The creation-quirked girl responded slowly. Not backing down or growing timid, Izuku nodded fiercely. I'm not cut out for this position, I'll just leave it at that. Congratulations." While the girl's mouth was still wide open, Izuku promptly bowed and walked back to his seat, his mind running a mile a minute as he took his seat. The truth was, he really did find the position interesting, as well as a great opportunity. And had he not been as self-aware as he was now, he might have gone for it, especially now since Kendo would be the main representative. But something about it felt wrong. He wasn't too sure what it was though. Was his confidence begging to fall short again? He was sure that holding a position like that would have required him to talk to everyone more, which he had to admit didn't sound so great. Still, he felt like there was another reason it didn't feel right, something almost instinctual. Perhaps he was even starting to pick up other subconscious traits from Peter without even knowing, like sticking to the sidelines and out of the spotlight whenever possible. Oh well, either way, what's done was done. He couldn't go back anymore, and he didn't regret his decision one bit. It was probably a really boring job anyway. While the newly elected vice representative had her small celebration at her desk, the class's own main representative couldn't seem to stop her jaw from hanging. What the hell? What were you thinking, Midoriya? After coming out of her small daze, Izuku smacked her forehead promptly, not liking her new friend's decision one bit. Sure, she may be a bit biased, since she wanted a familiar face to be her partner, but still. What the hell? She knew he had some confidence problems, but were they really that bad? She would have to talk to him about it later. Maybe he had some kind of ulterior motive. Yeah, that was probably it. With those last thoughts concerning the green-haired boy fading away, Izuku stood up to address the class one last time. All right, that was nice and fast. Now we have free time for the rest of homeroom. Yeah, that day had gone by rather quickly at UA, with Class 1 zooming past all of their morning classes, all of them feeling much shorter than usual because of the odd homeroom they had. Right now, said class was filling into the lunchroom slowly, with some students already sitting down and eating. Izuku happened to be one of those students, and it didn't take long for Kendo to spot his green mop of hair across the lunchroom sitting all by himself again. She was right in the process of taking her first step towards the boy when she heard a voice call out from behind her. Hey, Kendo. The orange-haired teen wasted no time and turned around, not completely recognizing the voice that called her. When she finally laid eyes on him, he was walking up to her slowly, with some hands waving behind him at a crowded lunch table. Oh, hi, you're Tetsu, right? She said rather meekly. The boy just beamed though, happy that she had remembered his name. That had to count for something, right? Yeah, that's me. Listen, I just wanted to know if you, wanted to sit with us at our table. You, seem pretty cool to me. I mean us. You seem pretty cool to us. He finally finished, putting a lot more emphasis on his last statement. Izuku blinked a few times before processing what she heard. Not only was that a mouthful, but he also didn't really do the best at relaying a clear message to her. Either way though, she understood clearly. After plenty of practice dealing with Tamaki and a bit with Izuku, she could decipher just about any kind of speech. Oh, I see, Kendo began, not exactly knowing how to put this, feeling even more guilty when she saw Kirishima give her a thumbs up from Tetsu's table. Turning around momentarily though, her confidence was quickly reinforced when she saw Izuku looking around for her almost worriedly. Yeah, as if she would abandon him without a second thought. Sorry Tetsu, I appreciate the offer, she said while bowing quickly, but I already have a table. I'd love to get to know you guys more during class though. Sorry again, she ended somewhat abruptly, walking off and finding her friend's table hurriedly. This in turn left the metal-quirked student looking quite awkward right in the middle of the lunchroom. Hello, rejected. Ashido giggled along with some other girls at the table. Hey, it wasn't like that. Don't worry about it, man. We can always try again later, Kursahima reassured, getting up and patting his friend on the back. Kirishima-kun, did you mean that genuinely? Or are you just trying to make him feel better? I still don't fully understand the difference in some Japanese tones, Tsunotori asked with genuine confusion, getting more giggles from the girls and some heavy sighs from all of the guys. Back with Kendo, Izuku seemed very much relieved when she showed up with a smile and plopped her stuff down at his table, quickly washing all of his worries away for the time being. There you are, Kendo-san. What took you so long? The boy asked innocently. Kendo hesitated for a moment, in the end deciding to just tell the boy the truth. Oh, Tetsu asked me to sit with them at their table. I guess that's where the main crowd sits. Izuku looked confused for a moment. Not knowing what she meant, he hastily took some time to scan the lunchroom for the table she was talking about. And it didn't take long for him to spot it either, spotting Tetsu's sharp features easily. After scoping out the table's occupants, Izuku instantly understood what it was, bringing his mood down a bit. It wasn't just some table, it was the table. He'd found out that subtle difference all throughout middle school. He easily recognized Bakugo sitting and eating quietly, keeping to himself along with that strong ice quirk kid. He also saw the brand new vice representative that he had conceded to not 3 hours ago. Kendo-san, why did you? Don't even start with your crap right now, Midoriya. Widening his eyes, the boy turned back to her, surprised to find her face contorted in some pretty serious annoyance. What? I know what you were gonna say, she began again. You were gonna say some crap about how I should have sat with them or something. Well, I don't want to. I already have a friend, and I'm not gonna abandon him when he's all alone. Shutting his eyes tightly, Izuku held back his wave of emotion. Why did this keep happening? Why did his confidence always waver so much? He couldn't keep on like this. He couldn't keep relying on Kendo to keep building him up like this. He needed to be strong on his own. All right, I'm sorry I doubted you, Kendo-san. Please forgive me. He bowed, bringing his head dangerously close to the table. Itsuka merely smiled though, glad that he dropped his argument so fast. He was getting stronger all right, even if he didn't know it. Yeah, whatever, you're still in trouble, mister. Why the hell did you give away the vice representative job so easily? Having you as a partner would have been awesome. Raising his head with a sheepish look on his face, Izuku scratched the back of his head, happy at least that the mood had turned playful for the moment. Oh yeah, sorry about that. I guess I just... R-I-I-I-N-G. Jumping at the sudden noise invading his ears, Izuku stopped talking and looked around frantically. He instantly identified that the noise was indeed coming from the school, and not inside his head, so at the very least there wasn't any imminent danger. Come on, Midoriya. It looks like everyone's evacuating, Kendo called out, standing up and pulling him along and out into the hallway. This turned out to be more of a mistake than anything else though, because as soon as they stepped out of the lunchroom, they were immediately sucked into a giant crowd of panicked UA students. And saying they were packed like sardines would be an understatement. Groaning at how hot and uncomfortable he was at the moment, Izuku did his best to shift through the crowd, but it was no use. They were all too tightly packed. It looked like his only options right now were either to wait for the congestion to end, or to think of another solution. Not busy with anything else at the moment, the boy got to work on the latter, thinking deeply in order to find a way out of this already odd situation without totally humiliating himself. Oh, breaking out of his thoughts abruptly, Izuku turned his head back to where he heard and now felt his orange-haired friend. Yep, there was no way he was getting back to thinking anymore. That was for sure. There, right behind him and pressed firmly into his back, was Kendo. Not hesitating to face forward once again with a crimson-colored face, Izuku straightened up like a board. He obviously knew her actions weren't voluntary, but it was still embarrassing as hell, especially when he could feel every single shift and movement she made. Over behind him, Itsuka wasn't doing so well either, and had Izuku been a little taller than her, she would have buried her equally red face in his back to hide it forever. Okay, stay calm. Try to focus on something other than the fact that you're pressing your boobs right onto your friend's back. No, I said don't think about that. Wow, his back is actually pretty firm. I wonder if... No, what am I doing? I am so messed up in the head. Who knows? Maybe he doesn't even notice. Kendo thought finally as she looked up at him, trying and failing to make herself feel better. Although his thoughts were just as panicked. Izuku's brain was a bit less coherent than hers was at the moment. Brain, frying, can't think, teeter, help, everyone stop. A new voice yelled from up above the hallway, successfully catching everyone's eye. Why are we all acting like children? We're UA students. Start acting like it. But the alarm, a general studies student pointed out. That alarm was just some reporters that opened the front gate. Look outside for yourselves. True to his word, the few people pushed up against the window confirmed the boy's story, making everyone calm down for his closing words. See, that's more like it, the boy said proudly, still hanging onto an exit sign for dear life. Hey, thanks a lot, man. Who are you anyway? A support course student asked with a thumbs up. Who, me? The boy said with a smirk, pushing his glasses up from the bridge of his nose confidently. My name is Tenya Ida, class representative of Class 1B. While most found his over-the-top revelation to be a bit hysterical, Izuku couldn't help but stare at the boy with a small smile on his face. He and Kendo were now at a comfortable shoulder length apart, so he quickly recognized the blue-haired boy to be the same one that helped them out during the entrance exam. And with just one glance over to his friend, he could tell that she recognized him too. Tenya Ida, looks like the other hero course class is gonna be pretty interesting too. Aw, come on Kendo, we weren't that awesome, we just did what we could since our quirks were so similar. The girl in question looked towards her red-haired friend, smiling while rolling her eyes. Oh stop it Kirishima, you're being too modest. You and Tetsu made an awesome team. Watching you face off against Awase and Minta was really interesting. It really made me wonder which one out of the two of you can harden their body more. Bringing up this apparently sensitive topic in her last sentence, Kirishima sprouted a fire in his belly, jumping up and preparing to declare how strong his quirk was. Before he could get the chance, however, he was promptly shoved away by his metallic counterpart, taking his seat right next to Kendo and smiling proudly. Well, of course it's me. His body just gets harder, but mine actually turns to steel. Pretty cool, huh? However, the orange-haired girl couldn't help but sweat drop slightly at the boy's actions, shaking her head dismissively as she looked around the bus. Currently, all of Class 1 were on the way to USJ, a training facility that specialized in specific and special rescue scenarios. It was overall quite exciting, and everyone was currently donning their hero costumes for said event. Well, all except for Izuku, who was sporting UASP uniform with his 2 web shooters and a utility belt accentuating it. And speaking of the boy, he quickly became the object of Itsuka's attention for the moment. She watched as he sat across from her, his eyes darting around the room awkwardly. It appeared as though he was having trouble getting into the same carefree spirit as the rest of class, his uneasy and shy nature preventing him from starting any conversation himself. She would have moved over to sit with him in a heartbeat, knowing that he was getting more and more outgoing around her. But she kept getting flooded by their classmates with questions about her. And having already denied them at lunch yesterday, she felt she had to at least try to connect with the rest of the class. Sorry, Midoriya, guess you're on your own for now. Luckily for her though, the boy looking awkward and worried was just his natural outer appearance, because on the inside, he was thinking up a storm. Aw man, I was hoping we wouldn't have to use our hero costumes in class for a while. I still need more time to repair mine. While the boy mumbled to himself quietly, he didn't notice one of his classmates move across the bus and take a seat right next to him. Should I even repair it though? It got completely shredded, but I should still be able to do it. My sewing has gotten better since I first made the costume a few months back. Maybe I should just make a whole new one. It's probably not even worth repairing the old one considering how tattered it is. And maybe this time I can borrow some materials from the support department to make it more durable. Hey, Midoriya-kun. Izuku jumped, getting startled by the sudden voice pretty much right in his ear. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, Jiro. Oh no, it's my fault, Asui-san. I just wasn't paying attention to my surroundings. After a very elongated and uncomfortable silence, Izuku cleared his throat and prepared to speak, his nerves only multiplying when he noticed some students were watching his interaction with his frog quirk classmate. Is there something you need from me, Asui-san? MMHM, she nodded slowly. First off, please call me Tsu. Okay, and no problem. Izuku croaked awkwardly. In reality, he already knew this would indeed be a problem. He'd never so much as called someone by their first name, so there was no chance in hell he was gonna start using nicknames comfortably. And second off, the frog quirk girl continued. I have a question about your quirk. Oh, Izuku breathed in relief. Finally, a topic he was actually comfortable talking about. Go ahead then. Nodding, the girl locked her abnormally large eyes with his green ones. It's been a while since I met another animal species mutant type. Usually you look at least a little bit like the kind of animal your quirk is based on. But you look completely normal to me. What's that about? Rather than panicking, Izuku took a deep breath and gave his classmate an even smile. He'd been getting more and more questions about his powers recently, and he was finally getting used to answering them on the fly. Oh, is that it? The boy asked with a hint of relief in his voice as he brought his hand up in motion for his classmate to look closer. Jiro, she croaked, inspecting the boy's fingertips closely. Are those hairs? Izuku nodded. Yep, the way I see it, I guess I got pretty lucky with how I turned out. I'm sure it would be really horrifying for everyone around me if I looked like a giant spider, the superpowered teen said sheepishly. Wow, that is really lucky, Jiro. I hate to admit it, but sometimes I do wish I looked less like a frog and more like a regular girl, Asui stated, voicing her inner thoughts and staring at the ground for a moment. Sensing the girl's demeanor shifting slightly, the green-haired boy quickly began shaking his head. Crap, that sounded horrible. Now she's gonna think I'm a jerk or something. Don't worry, Asui-san. You look fine. I didn't mean it like that, sorry. Your modifications actually look really cool. Yeah, they really suit you, the boy said somewhat frantically. The frog quirk girl, however, quickly shifted her demeanor to a sly-looking smile as she responded to the nervous boy. Jiro, thanks for the compliment, Midoriya-kun. That's so nice of you. Seeing her complete 180 shift in mood totally flabbergasted poor Izuku. So much so, in fact, that he didn't even know how to respond. What? Why did she turn happy like that so fast? It's like she was never even sad at all to begin with. Was she just faking it and messing with me? Or did she just want me to compliment her? But seriously, Midoriya-kun, call me Tsu, the girl insisted more seriously than before. The superpowered teen just sighed and shook his head, his brain a complete mess from all angles. Why are girls so confusing? It went without saying that all 20 students of Class 1 were more than impressed as their sensei led them through the enormous compound known as USJ. Most were left utterly speechless at the sheer size of the place, and many oohs and ahs could be heard at every new detail presented to them. Izuku in particular could barely hold in his excitement. Whatever sort of exercise they were in for today was certain to be a memorable one. However, his cheery demeanor was quickly halted into one of surprise when they made it deeper into the facility. the large presence of two famous pro heroes making themselves known to the group of students. Greetings, my young pupils. Are you ready for an exciting day of hero studies? Almost immediately, many cheers and shouts came from the crowd of Class 1A. It appeared as though the novelty of having the symbol of peace as their teacher had not worn off yet. Yes, now that's the enthusiasm I like to hear. The large man beckoned on, managing to somehow rile up the students even more. So much so, in fact, that his presence had completely overshadowed the other popular hero that was teaching today. Although, in all fairness, any hero would find themselves in the same position when put next to someone like All Might, wearing a puffy, white space suit and talking in a signature modulated voice. The Space Rescue Hero 13 chose this moment to speak up. Yes, I second that. It's good to see so much enthusiasm from our youth these days. Wow, it's really 13. An excited Kaminari exclaimed. Being a student here just keeps getting better and better. And for once, much to her surprise, his purple-haired classmate had no reason to disagree with him. You can say that again, Gyro added, smiling along with the boy. Today is gonna be fun. You're right about that, you brats. It will be fun, just not for you. What? All Might grunted, turning around and facing the interruption coming from deeper into the training grounds. Much to his surprise, the symbol of peace had to blink multiple times to make sure his eyes were not deceiving him. But much to his distaste, what was in front of him was no mere illusion. It was reality. There, down at the center of the training grounds, were at least 5 dozen villains, if not more, and they were all surrounded by what looked like purple smoke. TCH, a teleporting quirk, how frustrating. The number 1 hero thought to himself with a scoff. Things were shaping up poorly and they hadn't even been there 5 minutes. No matter, at the very least I still have a plethora of time on my hands. It seems that skipping patrol earlier was indeed a wise decision. Alright, you brats, prepare to die. After we're done here, no one will be left alive, especially not you all. But the towering symbol of peace didn't even give the man a chance to finish, quickly grabbing the situation by the horns and taking action. Eraserhead 13, protect the students. I will handle this. Aizawa looked like he wanted to protest, but in the end he kept his mouth shut. As much as he wanted to help clean up the trash that had invaded the school, he knew All Might was more than capable on his own. He also thought it wise to prioritize protecting his students, especially with a teleporting quirk on the field. Also, even though he wanted to protest, the second the symbol of peace gave his orders, he was off and flying down the training ground like the giant missile he was. California Smash! All Might shouted, shooting straight into the crowd of villains and causing a massive explosion, taking down a good chunk of villains as if they were bowling pins. Standing up and dusting himself off, the number 1 hero sharpened up his gaze and patiently waited for the dust to settle. Not surprised at all to hear the sounds of weak groans and general discomfort from the fallen villains. However, he soon found out that his ears could not always be trusted so strictly, because when the dust cloud finally dissipated, he was left looking at only a handful of enemies on the ground and incapacitated, while the rest of the group seemed to have totally vanished. Well, all of them except what seems like their leader and whatever that is. All Might thought to himself as he stared at a man covered in severed hands, along with what looked to be some kind of genetic monstrosity beside him. Errant teleportation quirks the best, All Might. Shigaraki cackled maniacally, not caring at all at how unhinged he must have looked. This man is not well. I must stop him and whatever that horror next to him is before this gets out of hand. No matter, not one student will be harmed today, villain, because I am here. What? Is this really happening? Ashido croaked out with a trembling voice. What do we do? Is this some kind of test? Minta screamed with an even greater level of panic. This is not a test. Aizawa cleared up, bringing the class's attention back to him. Everyone listen up. This is a real villain attack. These aren't the ideal circumstances to learn to keep calm, but the world doesn't care about that, so don't panic. Why yeah, calm down guys. All Might is here. He can totally take all those guys down. Uwe said somewhat shakily, most likely trying to convince himself more than his classmates. Things are never that simple. The underground hero continued after looking up from his phone. Don't panic, but also don't let your guard down. This could get ugly real quick. It looks like they're jamming our cell phone signal somehow. They must be trying to isolate us. This vocalized observation didn't do the students' demeanor any favors, especially the ones whose personalities were more on the timid side. This isn't good, Kendo-san, Izuku muttered under his breath, knowing only the girl right next to him could hear it. Surprisingly, the super-powered teen ended up being one of the few students in his class that wasn't breaking down in fear at the moment. Instead, his mind was moving 100 miles a minute trying to figure out what was going on. The orange-haired teen shook her head, breaking out of her own stupor at the mention of her name. What do you mean, Midoriya? Is something wrong? Before Izuku could nod at her like he intended, the fruits of the tingling in his head made themselves known. And not even the pro heroes at the head of the pack were able to react to how quickly the cloud of smoke enveloped around a big clump of students. No, Aizawa thought to himself in frustration as he saw the teleportation quirk manifest around at least 2/3 of his class. I can't use erasure on it. His body must be blocked by this purple mist. Without thinking, Izuku did the only logical thing his brain could think of, rather than attempt to jump out and risk saving no one. He chose instead to roughly shove the two people closest to him, quickly pushing them out of the mist right before everything went dark. I hope one of them was Kendo-san, the boy thought optimistically as he found himself falling with his spider sense on full blast. What's the matter, All Might? Surprised you can't just mow this one down with one shot like you do with every other villain? Pathetic, said Symbol of Peace ignored the oddly pale man in favor of focusing on his current situation, which he did have to admit was turning out to be quite a bit more challenging than he anticipated. At the moment he was locked in a standstill with this creature that the enemy called Namu, and he was quite curious about how it was going blow for blow with One for All. Does it have some kind of shock absorption quirk? As the two titans continued trading blows, Shigaraki couldn't help but continue to chuckle to himself as he watched Namu's masterful performance. This is pathetic of me. If I were in my prime, this would be over in no more than 3 blows. He's really doing it, master. He's going toe-to-toe with All Might. Ehahaha. Yes, fight, scream, destroy. End him, Namu. He doesn't know what a real hero is. A real hero is supposed to scratch and claw and struggle. That's what makes them cool. Not some godlike giant that doesn't have any weaknesses. If only you knew, All Might thought as he continued his struggle, doing his best to ignore the ever-so-growing pain in his side. Shit, Monoma yelled as he found himself falling from the sky out of the dark mist. Looking down below through terrified eyes, he could see that he was about to land on the deck of some kind of cruise ship. And worst of all, he hadn't copied a quirk recently, meaning he was screwed. Monoma-san, over here. The blonde-haired boy questioned, quickly looking around for a voice until he spotted his frog quirk classmate falling a few meters above him. The boy was just about to let out a not-so-polite comment about saving him, but it seemed as though Asui wasn't waiting for any sort of invitation, not wasting any time in stretching out her tongue and wrapping it around the boy. Ew, what the foo? Could you please not complain? Jiro, Asui stated as she reeled the boy back to her so they were now falling together. What did you just say? I can't understand you. Unwrapping her tongue from around the boy so that her speech wasn't impeded, the frog-quirked girl repeated herself. I said stop complaining, Jiro. At least now we're going to land in the water. Looking down and still struggling to open his eyes from the wind in his face, what the blonde-haired boy saw almost brought him to tears. There's villains in the water. We're still screwed. Jiro, Asui mumbled out as she looked down to the water below. True to his word, there was indeed a circle of about 6 villains forming a circle in the water. What do we do? I don't have a quirk right now. And those guys look like they have water quirks. They're gonna drown us. Or worse. They'll thwip. Monoma's delirious show of panic was quickly redirected to confusion when he felt something latch onto his costume. I got you guys. Hold on, Izuku yelled, pulling his 2 classmates over to him so that they were all over the ship again. Wasting no time listening to Monoma's new complaint about landing on the hard deck, Izuku shifted out of a nosedive and spread his arms and legs, making himself fall slower and rise above his classmate. The ceiling is too high in this place. I won't be able to get a web line up there, the boy thought, his mind moving quickly once again to come up with a solution. Making up his mind, the boy began firing a multitude of web balls down toward the ship below, aiming to get them stuck right under where his classmates were gonna land, while not exactly ending up with the result he was imaging. The impromptu web hammock definitely sufficed, easily breaking the fall of 2 heroes in training. All right, they're safe, but now for me. The green-haired teen thought with a slight bit of uneasiness. He'd trained to practice falling the way Peter did before, but never at a height like this. Note to self, I need to try and implement Peter's web wings into the Mark II costume, keeping his body spread out and open as long as possible. Izuku waited until the ground was only meters away from him before shifting into a tumble roll, wincing as the majority of the impact was absorbed into his back. Midoriya-kun, are you okay? Asui asked with urgency, not bothering to help her blonde classmate as he fell out of the spider hammock. The green-haired teen, however, would not waste time wiping away his classmate's worry, instantly kipping up to his feet after hearing her. I'm fine, Asui-san. What about you guys? The frog quirk girl opened her mouth to remind the boy to call her Tsu, but the obnoxious blonde behind her had other plans. What are we gonna do? There's villains everywhere, Monoma stuttered out, not even caring that there seemed to be webbing stuck to his butt. Also, right on cue, voices could be heard overboard the ship, and it didn't take a detective to figure out that they weren't friendly. I think those 3 brats landed on board. Well then, what are you waiting for, dumbass? Start climbing. Yeah, those juicy bounties aren't gonna cash themselves. The bounties. Did he say bounties? Their boss is rewarding them for killing us. The blonde cried out again, this time almost hyperventilating. In response to this, Izuku just took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. By the look on his two classmates' faces, he was gonna have to be the calm one here, which surprised him, since usually he was the one ready to rush back into his shell. Alright guys, listen up. We need to fight these guys off and get back to our classmates in trouble. Trust me, I'm freaking out on the inside too. But if you try to just focus on saving the class, it helps the nerves go away. Asui simply nodded, her eyes focusing on the boy as she gave him her undivided attention. Monoma, however, looked a little more hesitant, but nevertheless, he too knew the urgency of the situation, so he just gulped and nodded as well. What's the plan, Midoriya? Carolina Smash. All Might shouted valiantly, hitting the genetic monstrosity known as Namu with a powerful cross-chop. On the surface, the attack seemed to have no effect, but All Might knew better than that. Shock absorption, no matter how strong, has a limit like every other quirk, and I will eventually find it. Without another moment's notice, All Might doubled down and prepared to launch another series of American-themed attacks. But the opening of a misty portal behind him paused his action. What? As if the portal heard his inner confusion. A split second later, a giant vacuum of air began sucking in the symbol of peace, almost like a black hole. This is 13's quirk. While the terrifying effects of the space-like quirk had no effect on his strong and thick skin, it also didn't allow him to move forward much, if at all. And even though it was only active for a second, that was all the leverage the Namu needed to land a crushing blow to the hero's abdomen. Gah! All Might grunted painfully as he doubled over and grabbed the creature's fist. It was currently dug in deeply into his weak spot, and if the fresh blood trickling down from his lips were any indicator, he was sure he'd be feeling that one for a while. Alright Monoma-san, please, tell me what quirks do you have access to at the moment? Izuku asked politely, not trying to hide the fact that he was hoping for a quick response. Ugh, that's the shitty part. I haven't touched anyone since before we got on the bus. I'm quirkless right now, and to make it worse, I can't copy either of you two. Why did I get teleported with two mutant types? Shaking his head in frustration, the superpowered teen grunted as he went back to the drawing board, also duly noting the new piece of information he'd learned about the boy's quirk. Okay, that's a good side note, so my secret is safe. That mutant type cover story was genius. Shaking his head out of his thoughts, Izuku knew they were basically out of time. Oh well, time for plan B. Asui-san's quirk thrives in water, so we should just make the best use of that. TCH, I hate to say it guys, but I'm basically useless without my quirk. How about I just hide while you two fight? He said almost pleadingly, clearly trying to salvage as much dignity as possible. Asui looked uncertain at this request, but Izuku grew a small smile, clearly getting some sort of interesting idea. You know what? I think I have a way for you to help and get exactly what you want, Monoma-san, and I think you'll like it. You've already seen me do it once before after all. Gulp, I don't like the look on his face. Alright you punks, which one of you pipsqueaks is gonna make us rich? A villain with a shark fin on his head grumbled confidently as he jumped the railing and boarded the ship, his demeanor rapidly growing even more cocky as three of his companions joined him. They looked around for a moment before spotting a sliver of green in the corner of their eyes. Up there, on the roof. Come on guys. Not wasting any time. The four villains hastily climbed up to the small roof and assessed the situation, not exactly understanding exactly what they were seeing when they got there. There, about 20 meters in front of them was a blonde boy wrapped up in some sort of white cocoon. But that wasn't even the weirdest part. He was also being held back by a green-haired boy on some kind of slingshot. Oh shit. Monoma yelled at the top of his lungs as he was sent flying right over the head of the villains and off the ship at an incredible speed. Glancing back and catching a glimpse of the aftermath, he didn't want to admit it, but Midoriya's plan indeed worked to perfection. All four villains thought he would be shot at them, making them all jump to the floor where they would be just one click away from being incapacitated thanks to Midoriya's webs. That support item is so damn cool, the blonde boy thought as he looked back to see that the four villains were indeed all webbed up now. With that over with, the blonde then went back to thinking about self-preservation again. According to his green-haired classmate, he wouldn't even feel the fall inside this gooey ball he'd made out of webs. But he was starting to doubt that. So much so in fact, that he began to think back to the joke the boy made right before launching him. Hee, who knows Monoma-san? Maybe if she's feeling gracious, Kendo-sen will catch you with her quirk. TCH, like hell she will. Screw both of you. Wow, that worked even better than I expected. The super-powered teen muttered excitedly to himself as he checked out his handiwork. Hey, what the hell is this stuff? I can't move. Yeah, me neither. It's that Brant's quirk. He totally tricked us. Haha. Don't worry boys, there's still two more of us, remember? This isn't over. The last of the four spoke out from his spot on the floor. No, this is definitely over. Don't you guys remember three of us falling from the sky? Well, you've only seen two so far. Izuku answered back with a very obvious bit of sarcasm. Wait, what? Right on cue, a pair of unconscious villains were thrown over the railing and onto the deck, landing with a thump loud enough to garner attention. Eyes widening, the four immobile villains began sweating profusely as the frog-quirked girl hopped up onto the deck to join them all. You guys shouldn't have left these two behind, Jiro. They were pretty weak swimmers, so my quirk was a good match for them, the girl said with a wink, although the evildoers couldn't particularly tell if it was aimed at them or her teammate. Well shit, the four villains grunted together in unison. Izuku, on the other hand, reacted rather awkwardly to the girl's actions, scratching the back of his head and preferring to get back to other topics. Good job, Asui-san, the boy muttered, walking over to the two unconscious men and pressing his middle and ring fingers to his palm. Click. Not surprised, the boy tried his other hand, getting the same result. Yeah, I figured. I used a lot on wrapping up Monoma-sen like a sushi roll. Noting the interesting behavior of the boy, Asui observed closely as he discharged two casings from his wrists and reached down to his utility belt, not hesitating to refresh his creations with fresh web cartridges. It's easy to forget that he made those himself. That's so cool. Finalizing the adjustments and making sure his inventions were secure, Izuku looked up at Asui before shifting his focus to the battlefield beyond the water. I wonder if everyone is all right. We need to get back to the others, Asui-san. He trailed off, hopping up and perching on the railing in search of a better view. What he saw next, however, gave him the opposite feeling of comfort. No way. Itsuka Kendo had always prided herself on her fighting spirit and overall positive attitude towards life. Her general determination and tenacity was something that anyone would be hard-pressed to find outside of the hero community. And just in general, it was always safe to assume that no matter what was thrown her way, she would at least find a way to wrap her head around it. However, right now, she wasn't afraid to admit she was freaking out. Everything had just been on a constant decline from the moment they had walked into this crazy facility. Obviously, the biggest surprise factor was the villains themselves. As soon as they arrived, All Might took off and tried to take the fight to them, but that plan quickly fell through as soon as it formed. Needless to say, the situation went off a cliff from there. Great, just great, Itsuka thought to herself as she enlarged her hands and ran up to a villain covered in purple spheres, introducing him to the floor as she tried to gather her thoughts. First, that teleporting freak separates the class and spreads out the villains so All Might can't solo them. Then he comes back for seconds, bringing back up while also sending 13 and Aizawa-sensei to who knows where. Grunting in both frustration and worry, the orange-haired teen almost didn't realize her classmate was talking to her. Yeah, great job, Red. We make a pretty good pair, don't you think? Minta said with a smirk, some obvious second meanings behind his words. Sure, but focus up. We took down the few that came for us, but more could be coming any minute, she reminded, keeping a sharp eye while holding in her nerves. You tell him, Kendo-chan, Tsunotori said from behind the two as she grew a new set of horns. It looked as though she already had some sort of issue with the small hero in training. Ugh, will you two lighten up? I swear, the hotter a girl is, the more trouble her personality. Listen, I was scared at the beginning too. But relax, all these flunkies they sent after us are a bunch of pushovers. And All Might is here. Remember, he's totally kicking ass. Both girls rolled their eyes at the first sentence the boy muttered to himself. Kendo in particular was starting to understand why Yaoyorozu mentioned such a negative first impression with the boy. Plus, we have Monoma-sen going to get help, remember? Everything's gonna be fine. The purple-haired teen continued nonchalantly, even going as far as to yawn. While not exactly agreeing with her classmate on the direct amount of danger they were in, she did have to admit that she found comfort in the fact that help was on the way, even if the person going to get it wasn't on her best list. Rather than think about the blonde though, Kendo smiled as she instead thought about how he got to them. Or rather, who sent him. Monoma quickly explained that Midoriya sent him back to the main entrance for a variety of reasons. First, as a distraction for the villains they were facing. Secondly, so he would be safe. And thirdly, so he could make himself useful with different classmates' quirks. And while he didn't exactly use anyone's quirk to make himself useful, the boy volunteered almost instantly to run out of the facility and go find help. But hey, he still technically got all three objectives out of Monoma in the end. Pretty impressive. And speaking of impressive, she really needed to ask the boy more questions when she saw him again. That was the third time he'd saved her. And even though this time wasn't life or death, she was still very curious about how he could almost see things coming before they actually happen. Ironically enough, the boy surrounding her thoughts was also the very reason she was broken out of them a moment later. All Might, Kendo, Minta and Tsunotori all looked up in unison, their eyes widening as they saw Izuku flying through the air, noting that his speed was about the same as Monoma's was. He's going straight for the bosses. Is he insane? Minta yelled, his fear apparently coming back with a fiery vengeance. Look, Tsunotori pointed, her Japanese still sounding very rough. It looks like All Might is cornered. Looking closer, it was obvious that this was the case, but not to any fault of the symbol of peace. It seemed as though the three main villains had teamed up to put him in a not-so-advantageous position. But that's 3 against 1. No fair, Minta yelled in a panic as he attempted to chew his nails through his yellow gloves. This seemed to strike a chord with Izuku, because she was quick to respond to the boy with a realization of her own. It's just like Aizawa-sensei said, the world doesn't care about that. Gulping heavily, the purple-haired teen was about to bite back at the girl for provoking his fear, but he didn't get the chance because she took off in a dash for the heart of the facility. Hey, what the hell are you doing? Not you too, Red. But she wasn't alone, because a few seconds after her, Pony took off with impressive speed as well. Come on, Minta-san. You want to be a hero, don't you? The horned girl yelled back, not really expecting or waiting for a response. Stop it. Not like this. This is insane. You're both too pretty to die, he cried out, both girls rolling their eyes again at the boy's maturity, or lack thereof. Focusing back in, however, Izuku was happy to have some kind of backup with her. She knew the task ahead would be a challenging one. I can almost see the battlefield. Come on, All Might. You're the best around. You can do this, she thought frantically. It didn't take long for her to catch her stride and begin sprinting. But somewhere along the way her mind broke away from All Might and back to her green-haired friend. And Midoriya, you better not get yourself killed before I get there. No way, this isn't happening. The super-powered teen thought to himself as he flew through the air, tightening his body in order to streamline himself. The boy was on his way to a head-on collision with 3 villains and 1 former idol. And it wasn't a hopeful sight in the slightest. The large blue humanoid creature seemed to have All Might in a powerful hold from underneath, its left hand leaking with fresh blood from where it was digging into the hero's side. What? All Might is bleeding. His skin should be basically impervious. They must have caught him by surprise. But still, that doesn't make any sense. Realizing he was getting lost in thought, the boy shook his head and forced himself to focus. Okay, focus, Spider-Man. All Might needs you. It looks like that huge monster is halfway inside that teleporting mist. And now that Scary Hand Guy is approaching too. What's the plan? Wait, Scary Hand Guy. Og, All Might choked out, spitting up more blood into the air as the grip of the Namu tightened. How do you like that, you fake? Shigaraki cackled once again, very much enjoying himself as he approached the symbol of peace in his helpless position. Crap, to escape this I'll have to use more power. I only hope it doesn't burn up all the time I've saved today. Prepare to die, you false symbol of peace. The deranged leader cried out, reaching out with one hand and placing it firmly on the number one's elbow. Instantly, All Might knew what the man's quirk was, whether it was the sight of his very own highly durable costume being turned to dust, or the feeling of his skin going numb. He knew he was in trouble. Getting ready to power up and break free at the expense of his body, All Might tensed up and gathered his energy, preparing to cut loose and deliver an all-out attack. All Might, both Shigaraki and Kurogiri questioned as they turned to the source of the newfound disruption. Needless to say, both men were flabbergasted when a flying teenager adjusted himself in midair and shot a pair of web lines at Namu, pulling himself toward it at an incredible speed. Those look like webs, Shigaraki thought darkly, his instincts clearly reminding him of something that his mind couldn't quite catch up to. Of the 3 men present, however, none were more surprised than the symbol of peace himself. Why, young Midoriya, now propelled even faster by his arms, Izuku realigned his body, shifting from flying head first to feet first, no longer holding anything back considering his target was an All Might level villain. The boy's brain couldn't really fathom what was happening anymore. He was pretty sure he recognized the leader of this group of villains, but he had no time to worry about or process this, because All Might was in trouble. When the boy finally did land his very own spider version of a dropkick, he surprised himself with the results. Not only was he not used to putting all of his strength into one attack, but he also wasn't quite imagining how solid his target would be. TCH, what the heck? How dense is this thing? The super-powered teen thought incredulously as he felt the impact in his legs. While the sheer sturdiness of the creature was obvious after his feet made initial contact, Izuku's full power and momentum combined were easily enough to knock the monster back and out of the purple mist it resided in. In the blink of an eye, All Might felt the grip of the monster vanish completely, easily allowing him to get back on his feet a moment later. Turning to his student in a satisfied smile, the symbol of peace looked on impressively as Midoriya stood atop of the Namu. Impressive, young Midoriya. I'm unsure if I should be impressed that you have the strength to knock down that monstrosity, or more so confused that it's you who's helping me. Grabbing his left side with a grunt and dusting off his costume's residue on his elbow, All Might shrugged and took a fighting stance once again, not hesitating to give his student a signature smile. Thank you, young Midoriya. I am ever grateful for your assistance. I only ask now that you stay on the defensive and allow me to handle this. This has gone on long enough. Nodding at his teacher with a kind smile gracing his lips, Izuku aimed his web shooter downwards and gave the Namu a healthy dosage. Alright, I'll stay out of the way, the boy said slightly, the reality of the situation in front of him beginning to set in a bit. I really just did that. This is awesome, you bastard. That's my Namu. How dare you sully his artificial body with that disgusting quirk of yours? Get that sticky white stuff off of him, Shigaraki complained, his other ally, Kurogiri, now by his side as well. While still trying to keep his head in the game, the green-haired boy almost giggled at the villain's choice of words. He already knew without a doubt that Peter would have had a field day with that comment. Young Midoriya, All Might boomed in his heavy voice, instantly breaking the boy's thoughts. Be very wary of that man with the severed hands all over his body. Do not let him touch you. I suspect he has some sort of corrosion quirk. Understood. Understood, All Might. I'll keep my distance. The symbol of peace nodded to the boy, smiling even more when he saw him jump up and out of the way of the fight. Perhaps I was too hasty to judge him. Texas smash. The oversized man cried out as he pushed his fist through the air. He would have all the time in the world to think about his conspiracies later. Right now, it was time to protect his students. Shigaraki-san, get closer. Kurogiri began only to be silenced by a ball of webbing hitting his head. What? Shigaraki yelled in frustration as he looked up to where the boy had jumped. He seemed to still be in midair, as well as far away from the action, but that didn't necessarily mean he wouldn't help. It was at this point that the hand-themed villain finally got a good look at the boy, and not just his appearance either. No, the particular detail that had his attention right now was the action the boy displayed with his fingers in order to rain hell on them with his projectiles. The webs, they're coming from the devices on his wrist. However, the evildoer's internal revelation was cut short by the massive gust of wind from the symbol of peace's attack, pushing them off their feet and into the air. Gah, damn it, do something, Kurogiri. Og, I can't, Shigaraki-san, the wind is too strong. Landing on his feet with a small thud, Izuku observed as the villains were blown away, finally letting his thoughts settle on the man that appeared to be their leader. I know that's him. I will never forget that day. But what did it mean? Why were these people here at UA? The boy doubted that they were here for him. That would be way too much of a coincidence. I should report to Aizawa-sensei that I know these guys. It's the right thing to do. But wait, then that might lead into more questions about my powers. Young Midoriya, watch out. The green-haired boy jolted as he broke from his thoughts to a loud familiar ringing in his head. Turning just in time to widen his eyes in fear, the super-powered teen gaped as a large, blue fist came crashing down on his midsection, sending him flying down the battlefield. No, the number one hero screamed angrily, not hesitating to take off and meet the genetic creation blow for blow. TCH, I knew those shitty webs couldn't hold Namu. Shigaraki grumbled as he regained himself, getting to his feet much quicker than his purple-shrouded partner. This shitty kid. Who is he? I must know. Izuku winced as he skidded across the floor like a stone skipped across a river, his arms protecting him as much as possible. Og, my ribs. The boy moaned inwardly, his body creaking even more every time he met the pavement. For a moment it almost felt like his monodum would never end. But soon a sweet release was presented to him in the form of the lake within the facility, but even that was short-lived. Before the super-powered teen could land somewhat comfortably in the water, a purple mist appeared before him, swallowing him up. He couldn't see much through the mist, and even when it cleared up to show his new location, Izuku's world was still spinning much too fast for his sight to be of any use. Luckily, the green-haired boy had one sense that never failed him. Snapping his eyes open, Izuku jerked as his spider sense unthawed his fuzzy mind, waking him up like an alarm clock and hyper-focusing his brain. Okay, I'm still moving so my momentum hasn't stopped. The teleporter just changed my direction. Noted. But where am I? The words died in his mind before they had a chance to consider being uttered. Now standing a good 10 meters in front of him with a familiar terrifying smile was the leader of the villain group, his arm outstretched with his hand wide open and ready to catch him. Crap, there's not enough time. I can't change my direction. Yes, come here you little sh. Shigaraki-san, look out. Suddenly a pair of horns came soaring out of nowhere, lodging themselves right into the villain's arm with a concerning sound of tearing skin. What the hell? Shigaraki screeched violently as he stared down at his wound. The pair of horns had almost made it cleanly through his wrist. For a moment, the evildoer appeared to be considering whether or not to pull the horns from his damaged appendage, but something quickly derailed his train of thought. Hiya, Kendo yelled from behind as she delivered a powerful slap with an enlarged hand. It seemed as though sending people flying with attacks was the common theme today. I've gotcha, Midoriya. The girl focused quickly on her flying friend, not hesitating to enlarge her other hand and catch the boy as softly as she could. Landing as softly as one could inside a giant pair of hands, the super-powered teen did his best to grin. Ugh, Kendo-san, that was amazing. The boy groaned out through very visible pain. The orange-haired teen matched his smile, gently placing her friend onto his feet before assessing his many visible bruises. "It's no problem, Midoriya. I owe you for all those times you saved me. Are you okay?" Yeah, I'm fine, he said before attempting to straighten up before wincing in pain. That huge monster definitely broke a few ribs though. Gonna feel that one in the morning. Itsuka briefly wondered how the boy could crack a joke right now with the condition he was in, but put that thought aside when another voice captured her attention. "Hey, guys, sorry to interrupt, but I can't keep this guy busy for long," Pony shouted as she ran in their direction. Her horns were now growing back at a slower rate, and she appeared to have a good amount of cuts riddling her body as well. "He's not a good opponent for her," Izuku observed. "He can just redirect her horns right back at her." "Well, is he a good opponent for anyone?" is what Itsuka wanted to ask. Instead, she just took on a fighting stance and prepared herself. "Well, now he's up against 3 of us. Let's see how good those odds are." Despite how grim the current situation looked, Izuku couldn't help but smile at his friend as he too adopted a fighting stance. "Thanks again for saving me, both of you." As the pair prepared themselves to fight alongside their classmate, Shigaraki could be seen a little ways away picking himself off the floor with muttered profanities. "Damn these kids," the villain leader cursed under his breath as he assessed the battlefield. The 3 students who had gotten involved were all currently confronting Kirigiri, if you could even call it that. Running around and just barely avoiding him was a more proper description. But that didn't matter as much to the deathly pale man. No, what really concerned him was the fact that the fight between Izuku and All Might was now reaching its climax, and it was very clear the creature was on the losing end. "I will not allow you all to harm my students," the symbol of peace shouted, his anger boiling over into his punches causing his opponent to falter. "No, NOMU," Shigaraki screamed to no avail. Even Kirigiri stopped his assault on the heroes in training to pay attention. His surprise shone on his face as well. With everyone's attention on the conclusion of the battle, All Might didn't hesitate to end things quickly. "We must go beyond," the number 1 hero bellowed, his punches speeding their pace and his teeth gritting in struggle. Having already fallen off tempo from the barrage of attacks, Namu could do nothing but stand there and endure the cluster of earth-shaking punches from the symbol of peace. Said symbol of peace noticed this and quickly realized that the creature's shock absorption was at its limit, granting him a clear path to wrap this fight up. "Plus ultra," he shouted out with more passion than ever, reaching back with his right fist and preparing a finishing blow. All around the battlefield, pairs of eyes were glued to the action, and none were more curious as to how the fight would end than Izuku Midoriya. The boy really did try to look away from the action. After all, he should have been focusing on the task at hand that was evading Kirigiri. But even the purple-shrouded villain was gawking at the scene before him. That's why the super-powered teen was somewhat confused when his spider sense began going off with a villain in plain sight. Already knowing what he needed to do, Izuku took action, shoving a very distracted Pony away from him and tackling Itsuka, who was a bit further away in the opposite direction. All before an enormous glacier came crashing through the battlefield right where they all stood a moment ago. After that, everything blurred together, with loud sounds beginning to blare all around. The boy's senses overloaded as his head began to throb. "Welp, I hope I pushed Tsunotori-san far enough away from the ice. At least Kendo-san is okay." Feeling the girl shift around under him, Izuku let his eyelids fall heavy for a moment and just relaxed, his mind moving a mile a minute trying to distinguish all the sounds around him through his raging headache. He could have sworn at one point that he heard the glass from the ceiling take a massive hit, along with chatter and some explosions signaling the arrival of other students. Where the hell are all the villains? A revved-up Bakugo demanded, no one in particular. Fluttering his eyes open at the familiar voice, Izuku noticed a frazzled head or orange hair directing its attention toward him. "Damn it, Midoriya. How do you keep doing that? Are you okay? You don't look so good," Kendo spilled out rapidly. "What? This? It's nothing, I'm fine," he said nonchalantly, though it came out as more of a groan. In reality, the green-haired boy couldn't help but feel touched at the genuine concern she was showing as she looked around for any sort of help. The girl must have found what she was looking for, because her face soon lit up like a Christmas tree. Ignoring his dismissal, Kendo didn't hesitate to take charge of the situation. "Oh look, there's Aizawa-sensei with some of the others. Do you think you can stay here while I am here?" Suddenly appearing before the pair with a proud pose, All Might's unexpected presence got a small squeak out of Itsuka, which Izuku would have found cute had he not been waiting for an update on the current situation. "All Might, that huge villain, is it? Fear not, young Midoriya, for I have dispatched the issue. What is it you kids say these days? I raised the roof on him." Both teenagers looked at each other blankly as a singular sweat drop formed on their forehead. It was only when the dust finally began to clear out that everyone was finally starting to become visible. Aizawa, along with a handful of students, stood a good ways away, not appearing to have seen them yet. But that wasn't who the trio was focused on. Instead, they all looked forward about 20 meters to the two remaining villains as a purple shroud washed over them. Kurogiri and Shigaraki stood perfectly still as they slowly sunk into the dark mist, only the latter reaching out and pointing a finger directly at Izuku once they were almost out of sight. "I know your secret." "Damn it." Kurogiri flinched as his colleague continued throwing a temper tantrum and making a mess all over their secret base. "I can't believe this shit. That scrawny little kid in the alley that day got the damn spider. This isn't fair," Shigaraki wailed, lashing out on another piece of furniture. "Shigaraki-san, perhaps you should calm down for a mom." "Shut the hell up, Kurogiri. You're the one who lost the damn thing and stopped me from killing him that day. Do you see what you've caused?" The purple shrouded being gulped and stepped back nervously as his pale boss approached. Shigaraki-san, please forgive me. We can stop this, we can seek the boy out and end him." Walking up to his subordinate and closing the distance to corner him, the hand-covered villain could only glare deeply. "Yeah, and then what? Master will be all over us if we act without his orders. And if we kill him, the spider really is gone and unusable." Noticing that his leader's eyes glazed over and broke eye contact, Kurogiri instantly knew what he was thinking before finishing the train of thought. "Right, if we keep him alive, then Master can take the quirk back. You're a genius, Shigaraki-san." "Tisk, you dumbass, I oughta kill you for how stupid you are." "Huh." Breaking away from the dark-misted villain, Shigaraki stomped back towards the bar and found a seat that he hadn't corroded away. "Having Master take back the quirk is a last resort, and even then it might get us killed for insubordination." Feeling the tension in the pregnant pause, Kurogiri merely stayed silent and waited for his leader to finish. "Don't think so small, Kurogiri. If we find out more about that damn brat, maybe he can switch sides willingly." Widening his eyes, Kurogiri couldn't help a smile from forming as the puzzle pieces all fell together in his head. "And that way we can say our plan was to give it to him all along." Shigaraki smiled devilishly as his purple-shrouded friend finally got the picture. "It was a damn good idea after all. Looks like we're watching the sports festival this year, Kurogiri." Shota Aizawa definitely considered himself someone who very much paid attention to detail, often finding himself in the background. He was no stranger to staying silent, but that wasn't always a bad thing. It allowed for more listening and observation, which in turn strengthened his senses and overall gut feeling. He always trusted his gut. Logic would always fail eventually. The attack on USJ just yesterday was proof of that, which was the primary reason he was full of brooding concern as he walked through the halls of the school with one destination in mind: the principal's office. The students were all safe and out of danger, so that wasn't an immediate concern. Sure, he was slightly ticked off due to the fact that he couldn't help All Might with the bulk of the fighting yesterday, but everything ended well, so he couldn't complain. The school had even cancelled school today in order to appease parents and keep them calm, so everything was under control now. Well, mostly under control. "Damn, I should have been there." As Nezu's office came into view, Shota shook his head at the recollection of statements from multiple students who witnessed the main fight, or at least the end portions of it. In basically all of the statements, one name continued to come up: Izuku Midoriya. Stepping inside the spacious office, Aizawa resisted the urge to sigh as he took a seat in front of the principal and next to a very skinny-looking All Might. "Why do I feel like I already know what this is about? Alright, let's get this over with." The underground hero began with a small yawn. "What's so important that we needed another one of these super-secret meetings? Do not take this so lightly, Eraserhead. This is serious. I think my suspicions have been confirmed." All Might stated seriously, all but leering at the erasure user. Aizawa noted that Nezu was staring forward silently with no reaction at all. "Just cut to the chase already, I get it. This is a big deal." All Might stared for a bit longer before clearing his throat and continuing. "As I just told Nezu, I heard our mystery villain say something quite interesting to young Midoriya just before him and the teleporter disappeared. Without hesitating for even a moment, he pointed at us and said word for word, 'I know your secret.'" Silence hung in the air for a solid minute as the words sunk into the teacher. In fact, even Nezu seemed to be processing still, and he'd already heard the story once. Was anyone else there to witness this? The small creature began, breaking the thick layered silence. All Might didn't seem to appreciate his curiosity, however. "Yes, another student, young Kendo, I believe. Is my word not enough, dear friend?" Nezu kept his straight face and ignored the sarcastic bite from the number one hero, replying without an ounce of hesitation. "I see. This is most unfortunate. I do not wish to bring any suspicion to our theories by snooping around and asking another student. We will need to tread carefully here no matter what we decide to do." Grunting slightly, All Might nodded, turning now to Aizawa, who had yet to even react to the news shared over a minute ago. "Well, this certainly got interesting." Turning his attention to the underground hero now as well, Nezu raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, Aizawa? You have something?" Looking up from the floor for the first time, Aizawa let out a long sigh. "I agree, All Might. That is indeed very concerning." feeling like someone was finally on his side. The symbol of peace burst into a wide grin as his fellow teacher continued. Don't look at me like that. It's not for the reason you think. Looking even more confused now, All Might was about to open his mouth when Aizawa cut him off. You said he pointed at all of you, so yes, it's possible that he was pointing directly at Midoriya, and we should definitely be on high alert when it comes to him. But that isn't the only possibility. What if he was pointing at you, All Might? Nezu's eyes instantly widened, a rare show of emotion that was quickly swallowed up by pure indifference once again. All Might, on the other hand, was gritting his teeth as if he was stumped on a frustrating riddle that he just couldn't find the answer to. Regardless of their facial reactions, it was the principal that reacted verbally to the comment first. I see, I had not considered this option. That would indeed be a terrifying scenario. I commend you, Aizawa. It would be good to prepare for this as well. TCH, that's impossible. No one knows my secret. All Might choked out through gritted teeth. Hey, relax, All Might. Like I said, it's not like we know for sure. Aizawa reminded the man, hoping to calm his irritated state. Your theory about Midoriya could still be true. If anything, this just motivates me even more to keep my eyes on him. His actions yesterday proved at least that he's on our side firmly for now. But that can all change in an instant. This seemed to stabilize the mood of the room momentarily, but not for long. Not if Nezu had anything to say about it. You're right, Aizawa, about both points. In my opinion, both could be right, but both could also be very wrong. I've been holding back a very important piece of information that you both must hear. Both men turned their full attention to the white-furred creature, not daring to interrupt even once. This morning we found evidence that our security breach on Tuesday was more than just reporters. A class schedule was stolen, and they knew just where to look. It appears that whether we know who it is or not, we officially have a mole. All Might wasted no time in practically jumping out of his seat, taking the honors of speaking first gladly. There, that's proof. We need to find Midoriya and arrest him. I have a friend in the police who can get all the truth out of him in no time. Aizawa stood slowly from his seat as well, making heavy eye contact with the symbol of peace. All Might, you need to calm down, stop acting like a child. We don't have all the facts yet. We need to. Don't have all the facts. Then let's interrogate him, damn it. Nezu just admitted that there's a mole. How can we not follow up on this information? While I agree with your urgency, All Might, Aizawa is right. We cannot make a rash decision. If the boy is guilty, then revealing that we know right away is not for the best. All Might grunted to himself and turned away from the two men, running a frustrated hand through his wild blonde hair. Aizawa, on the other hand, kept his composure as he thought to himself, his eyes narrowing in suspicion more and more. This doesn't make sense. Nezu, if I may, I believe that our best course of action is to just remain vigilant for right now. Something just isn't adding up. Both Nezu and All Might now had their full attention on the tired-looking teacher. Neither of them looked very agreeable at his suggestion. What do you mean, Aizawa? Nezu questioned. While I agree that All Might's proposal is too rash, yours is on the opposite side. Could you be more clear? It's just, think about it. This doesn't add up. Why would the villains go through all this trouble to plant a mole, only to give up his identity themselves? The principal merely nodded, appearing to have already considered this possibility. But All Might looked stunned, his theory well on its way to being crushed. I want to keep this school safe as much as you two do, but we can't go around making too much noise about things like this. It has to be handled silently and discreetly, just like underground hero work. Very well, Nezu stated with a nod of approval. Aizawa has a point. We will continue to stick to the shadows. Both of you will keep very close eyes on Midoriya. But no action will be taken without my knowing. Is that understood? All Might knew Nezu was directing that last comment at him, and it aggravated him to no end. He knew that both men had good points, but he just knew in his gut that something about Midoriya was fishy. One thing was certain, he would get his answers one way or another. With a stiff nod, All Might rose and exited the room with a sharp slam of the door in his wake, leaving the remaining two heroes in a comfortable silence. Nezu couldn't keep his curiosity at bay. Aizawa, what is your true opinion of the boy, without any of this conspiracy? Can I be honest? Of course. Taking one more deep breath, the tired man spoke. I'll admit the kid has rubbed me the right way so far. He's strong but also modest. I'd even go as far to call that modesty timidness sometimes. I don't know him so well just yet, but he's easily one of my top students. And I would be lying if I told you that I want him to be the traitor, because I don't. Especially not after the guts he showed yesterday. Nezu took a moment to dissect the information he was given, looking as though he was staring into the teacher's very soul. Out of nowhere, though, a bright smile appeared on his small and furry face. You are a good teacher, Aizawa. I'm grateful to have you on my staff. You may take your leave now. Thank you for your time. Nodding without another word, Eraserhead got up and walked out, leaving the principal alone with his thoughts. My oh my, what are we going to do with you, Izuku Midoriya? I hope your teacher is right about you. Itsuka Kendo winced as she took a kick directly to her stomach, falling to a knee as she attempted to catch her breath. I'm proud of you for wanting to train so fast after what happened yesterday, Itsuka, but I'm shutting it down. Your mind is clearly elsewhere. Wincing slightly as she attempted to stand back up, Itsuka responded defiantly. No way, Dad, I'm not done yet. Needing no more convincing than his daughter slipping on her own sweat and falling back onto the mat, the man known as Itaru Kendo smiled as he finalized his decision. Yeah, you're through. I've never beaten you that easily in sparring. And we aren't even using our quirks. Wipe down the mats and hit the showers. I have another class to teach in half an hour. Blowing hair out her face with a pouting huff, Itsuka sat up and watched her father walk away. He's right. What's wrong with me? The girl played dumb, but she knew exactly what was wrong. She wouldn't say it outright, but something about yesterday was really eating at her, or better said, someone. She just couldn't help that Midoriya was such an intriguing person. And if she had a handful of questions for him before, well, let's just say that now that handful had turned into a truckload. What was he thinking attacking the villains head on like that? He was usually so much smarter and careful about his decisions. And what about those creeps that attacked the school? Who were they? And why did they tell All Might they knew his secret? What was that about? Ugh, this is so annoying. I'm gonna kill that kid when I see him tomorrow. Taking up all this space in my brain like this, I'll show you. Wait a second, I'll show you. All of a sudden, a light bulb went off in the orange-haired teen's head about something she had already mentioned to her green-haired friend. Something that could give her the perfect excuse to talk to him. Wow, I sound like some lovesick teenager. Dad, hold up. Turning around, the very muscular and red-haired man had his disciplined expression blank once again. Yes, dear. I want your advice on something. It's about teaching. Putting a large and calloused hand to his chin, the man hesitated. I'm sorry, Itsuka, I'm not sure I understand. You mean teaching as in martial arts? Kendo blushed at her indirect wording. Yeah, that. I was just wondering if you could give me pointers since I've never taught anyone before. Well, at least not one-on-one. The truth was that she had taught many times alongside her father in their karate dojo. But if she was really gonna train Midoriya out of his funky fighting style, he was gonna need more than just pointers on form. Interesting. I assume this is for a classmate of yours. Itsuka nodded, allowing for him to continue. I see. Well, there's not much of a science to it, dear. It just comes from the heart. Your drive to see the person improve as well as your love for the martial art. You already know many stances for many different fighting styles. Obviously, we prefer karate, but I've made sure your range of knowledge is deep in almost every martial art. So as long as you remember those first two things and you know the art, you can teach any way you want. Itsuka looked on proudly at her father, his words hitting her in all the right places before she realized he wasn't done. Honestly, you're going to have an advantage with it being a one-on-one lesson. In my opinion, that is the true way to teach someone to fight. Endless sparring, with trial, error, and pain. Those are the best teachers. Now grinning from ear to ear, the big fist user now knew exactly what she needed to do. Thanks, Dad. That's great advice. She shrieked out as she pulled her dad in for a big hug, ruffling his daughter's hair with a grin that reached his eyes. The man took a moment to cherish the closeness with his daughter in a rare show of emotion. There, go on now, dear. The mats still need cleaning. Kendo promptly slipped away from the hug with a groan. She was hoping he would forget about that. Ugh, my body feels like it's been inside a blender. Groaning like a zombie, Izuku squirmed around under his sheets until he was sure sleep was no longer possible. Sitting up slightly, the boy stretched his shirtless upper body with a heavy grimace as the soreness of yesterday hit him like a train. Ugh, remind me to leave a bad review on the Namu Express next time. The boy mumbled to no one in particular, craning his head to check the time. 1:30 in the afternoon. Wow, look at me becoming a useless member of society. Getting up with a few more spurts of pain. Izuku at the very least rejoiced in the fact that his slowly growing sense of humor was back after the heaviness of yesterday. He had only noticed after the fact how intense and serious he had been during the USJ incident. Which, to be fair, could you blame him for? Yesterday was his first ever villain attack. Heck, it was probably everyone's. It really was an indescribable experience. It was a mixture of shell shock, fear, and the slightest bit of excitement. And that really freaked him out. No wonder Peter is always joking around. It keeps the mood light not just for the reader, but for his own sanity as well. An exceedingly loud rumble of his own stomach was what it took to end the teen's internal thoughts. I guess I should get off my butt now, shouldn't I? Grabbing his firm stomach in an attempt to quell his hunger, Izuku walked over to his desk and sat down, examining its new contents while also brainstorming his plan for the day. All right, breakfast can wait a minute. This might be the perfect way to spend my day off. Running the interesting material through his sensitive fingers, the green-haired boy's mind was running at an Olympic pace. Training was definitely out of the question for today. He had gotten pretty good at gauging the speed of his healing factor after the battle trial earlier this week, and by his estimate, his cracked ribs would be at least serviceable by tomorrow. No, what he had set aside for today was using the special carbon fiber thread that Majima-sensei had supplied him with. It was officially time to begin work on his Mark II suit, although the material is a little darker of a green than I wanted. Oh well, it's still gonna be awesome. Already having specs written down for a while now, Izuku was about to begin sewing when his stomach grumbled again, this time even more aggressively. Yeah, you're right, tummy. Some food first will give us the boost we need. Right on cue, the boy heard soft knocking on his door, presumably his mom trying to determine if he was still asleep. I'll be right out, Mom just rolled out of bed. Oh, thank goodness. I was beginning to think something was wrong, she said in her meager and muffled voice through the door. Ooh, that must have been such a traumatic experience for my baby, and on his first week no less. Are you sure you're all right, honey? You don't want me to go down there and set that fancy school straight? The super-powered teen couldn't stop the slight upwards curling of his lips at his mother's worry over him. Not only was the idea of his tiny and shy mother going and ranting to the principal amusing, but he was pretty sure the school was already dealing with enough complaints right now. Thanks, Mom, the boy chuckled, picking up a shirt off the floor and throwing it on. But I think Yue got the idea from all the other parents already. Everything's fine. She didn't sound convinced, but Inko relented. Okay, Izuku, if you're sure. I'm gonna start on lunch. I'll let you know when it's ready. Thanks, Mom, he replied, listening to her soft footsteps get further and further away. He felt good that she was here for him, but it was still not ideal to get her involved in this mess, though I doubt the school would even listen to her anyway. After what that villain said to me yesterday, there's no way that All Might isn't suspicious of me. Should he just come clean? He knew his situation wasn't normal, but he hadn't broken any laws as far as he knew. So what was wrong with telling the truth? Because I'll get kicked out of UA, that's why. Izuku shook his head and pushed those thoughts back as far as he could. There was no way he would let that happen. He wasn't hurting anyone, so his secret was staying a secret for now. Ugh, how am I gonna explain this to Kendo-san? She was right there with us. And what about those crazy villains? They remember me too. Ugh, this is so crazy. In the end, the boy vowed that if he ever saw those villains again, or if they became any sort of threat to the school, he would come clean immediately. He didn't feel good about it, but it was what he was going with, even if it did feel like a small, yet selfish decision that Peter would have made, only to regret later on. R-I-I-I-N-G. All right, class, settle down, into your seats, Aizawa muttered, a small yawn escaping his lips. The whole class swiftly began to plop into their desks without needing to be told twice. Despite everything that had happened a few days ago, all seemed normal in the class of 1A. But as everyone got settled and turned their attention forward, it made it all the more obvious when one student had their attention elsewhere. That idiot is late. Where on earth is he? Kendo thought distastefully. Her annoyance burned a bit as the boy had once again left her hanging on the walk to school this week. Noticing that his main class representative had her eyes glued to the door, Aizawa opened his mouth to say something, but a new third party beat him to it. I'm here, Izuku all but shouted as he burst through the door a little too roughly. Sorry I'm late, Aizawa-sensei, the teen said again, still attempting to catch his breath and gather his jumbled thoughts. Sighing even deeper than before, the underground hero rolled his eyes. Just shut up and sit down, Midoriya. You're causing a ruckus. With an audible gulp, the green-haired boy quickly shuffled to his seat, unintentionally making as much noise as possible. He also did his best to avoid locking his green eyes with some intense turquoise ones, completely naturally and inconspicuously of course. Letting out one final sigh as the room turned their attention back to him, Eraserhead began his thought again. All right, as I was about to say, I'm glad you're all okay. I hope you all took yesterday to recover from the shock of Wednesday. Most of the class nodded in response. You all did incredible in defending both yourselves and your classmates, and I'm proud to call you my students. Growing more upbeat at their sensei's words, more and more students began to brighten up, with only a few outliers looking indifferent. And speaking of those outliers, however, it was not all fine and dandy. We got lucky, and some of you were outright reckless with your quirks. Overall, I consider it a miracle that we got out of there with only minor injuries, Aizawa concluded morbidly, instantly killing the upbeat atmosphere forming in the air. In the end, the instructor began again. What matters is that you're all okay. Some of you may not see it this way, but what you all experienced was exactly what's waiting for you out in the real world. Being a hero is not all sunshine and rainbows. I know that most of you understand that, but I just want to make sure. Getting that first experience out of the way now will likely make it a lot easier to deal with in the future. Is that understood? Yes, sensei. They all called out in unison, a more intense and motivated feeling washing over the room. Good, now we can get on to the real news. As I'm sure you all know, the UA Sports Festival is drawing near. Plus, great, the other hero class probably hates us now. Izuku sighed as he left the last class of the day, his wandering thoughts drifting to earlier when Bakugo decided to take on almost all of Class 1B. I'm honestly kinda surprised that Kaken didn't get physical when their class representative stood up to him. He looked furious. In reality, though, he knew Bakugo wasn't an idiot. Any kind of fight would have been grounds for some serious punishment. Not to mention that the sports festival was in 2 weeks' time. That was where all frustration could be dealt with properly. Still, it would have been pretty funny to watch an instructor come out of nowhere and try to stop them. Or better yet, Kendo-san, she's our representative and already an expert on de-escalation, haha. Speaking of the orange-haired teen, Izuku had been forced at lunchtime to cough up why he had ditched her this morning on the walk to school. This had him stuttering and apologizing like a fidgeting mess. His only relief was when she started laughing at his explanation of staying up late to work on his costume. He really needed to get better at time management. Don't worry about it, dork. Just make it up me by meeting after school in Gym Gamma. I have a proposition that you might be interested in, especially with the sports festival coming up. Shaking from his thoughts to the present, Izuku pressed forward those some doors. What he saw next left him absolutely speechless. This gym is amazing. Are those panels on the floor to change the layout on command? I've never seen anything like it. The boy didn't get to geek out any further because a waving Kendo caught his attention in the corner closest to the entrance. She had already changed into a turquoise shirt and a black pair of leggings. And there must have been a storage closet somewhere nearby as well, because laying at her feet was a large red sparring mat. Over here, Midoriya. Did you bring your gym clothes like I asked? The boy nodded as he took in his surroundings, gulping as he began to catch a whiff of where this was going. Smiling genuinely and punching her open palm roughly, Izuku happily responded, "Sweet, then get changed and take off your shoes, cause you're about to learn how to fight."